Okay, so if everybody's ready, we could get started. Welcome to the third meeting of the Transit Commission on the 20th of March, 2019. We believe we've got everybody here. Sorry, I missed Catherine. We'll give her a minute. We'll give her a minute before we start because it's not quite 9:30 yet. Okay, it's 9:30. We'll start without Councillor McKenney. So welcome everybody to the meeting. We're going to start this morning's meeting with a presentation on an award for Heroism. If we'll go over to the podium for that. Is this already on? Is this on? Okay, great. Okay, good morning, everybody. I have the distinct pleasure to begin the Transit Commission meeting today by awarding Special Constable Sarah Kennedy with the award for Heroism. Hopefully Sarah's here. Well, join me. This award is presented to employees who take decisive actions to assist others under extraordinary circumstances. Her act of heroism was while driving to work at 5:30 a.m. in the morning of August 16, 2018. Sarah Kennedy, a special constable with OC Transport, observed smoke coming from a home and stopped to investigate. Suspecting a fire, she took action by making sure to wake up all the occupants of the home. And the home happened to belong to another OC Transport employee, Alan Wong, an electric rail operator. Is Alan with us today, too? Nope. Maybe he's riding the rails. I saw a lot of trains this morning. Sarah called 911 and assisted in evacuating members of the household. Ottawa Fire arrived and promptly extinguished the fire. Only once the family had been evacuated did Alan realize that both he and Sarah were employees of OC Transport. The act of heroism prevents a potentially tragic situation had Sarah not acted by intervening at a stranger's home. I'd like to share with you some of the words used to describe Sarah's actions in her nomination for this award. Alan Wong wrote of Sarah's actions, "I would like to commend Sarah for her actions, being extremely competent, compassionate, professional, and generous. There's no knowing what the outcome would have been if she had not been there. But everything turned out okay, and so on behalf of my family, Alan would like to thank Sarah profusely." I'm also happy that Sarah can be here today with her family, and I'd like to invite Special Constable Sarah Kennedy to join me at the podium. And as Chair of Transit, it's my honor to recognize you today. Congratulations and thank you. Okay. All right, thank you. Thanks. Okay. Thank you all. We'll get back to the meeting. We'll now proceed with the regular meeting. Are there any declarations of interest by commissioners? No? Okay. Confirmation of the minutes. Minutes number 2. Carried. Carried. Thank you. I better say the date, Wednesday, February 20th. So confirmed, you have that. Now, communications, response to inquiry TTC 2-19 as noted. For those who were present at the last meeting, there were two other inquiries, one related to the feasibility of expanding the family pass, and the other was about a zero-emission bus pilot project. Staff have advised that additional time will be needed to respond to these, so we will receive an answer on these two inquiries in the coming months. So, having already addressed the first item, let's go item number 2. Sorry, we're going through the consent agenda. Item number 2, ready for rail, Old Train Confederation line, operational readiness. The General Manager, John Manconi, will be providing a presentation, so we're going to hold that item. Item number 3 is the fare strategies to increase transit ridership consistent with the city's transportation master plan. We have a speaker, so we'll hold that. And item number 4 is the Ottawa Seniors Transportation Committee proposal for Pick Your Ride Free Day. We're also going to hold that item for the same reason, that they're speakers. And we're going to give staff an opportunity to comment on that one. And finally, item number 5 is the service scheduling regular provision of the accountability performance reports to Transit Commission. We'll be holding this item as I'd like to allow the mover and OC Transport staff and legal services the opportunity to comment. So back to the first item. Mr. Manconi, are you ready with your presentation? Thank you.
Yes, I am, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Chair and members of the Transit Commission. With the launching of the LRT, as I've said many times, OC Transport will be going through the most significant transformation in the history of the organization. Every single element of the operation changes with this launch. We have talked on many occasions about the what of the LRT and the when we will launch. Today is about the how. Today, I would like to talk about the single most important thing, our customers. As you know, our customers have endured 5 years of changes, interruptions, challenges, detours, and so forth. When it comes to the launching of the LRT, our customers, through many focus groups and discussions, have told us two things that are important to them. Number one, how will this change impact my commute? And secondly, will you take care of me every step of the way? So today is not about when are we going into revenue service, but rather it's about our customers. The single most important thing we need to take care of, and we will take care of them. This team that's here today has put together a phenomenal rollout plan. And as you know, we have been incrementally introducing changes that did not just happen. It was a planned approach because our customers told us loud and clear, no big bang, don't just throw things onto us. So let's look back on the 5 years of the changes they've been through. Fare structure changes. Types of routes have changed. Elimination of express routes. Changes in logos, signage, websites, wayfinding, incremental rollout of bus changes. I could go on and on. That was all designed and planned as part of the incremental rollout. And now we're here for the final step of our campaign. We are ready for rail. We're going to share with you today how we plan to take care of the customers every step of the way. We will outline what many of you have been asking. What will change for them? When will it change for them? And how we plan to be there with them every step of the way, their journey. And I can guarantee you that once their routines are reestablished with this amazing system, they will be satisfied customers. Our vision is to take care of our customers throughout this change. This team has done a phenomenal job, and I want to thank them for their work. I also want to thank all our OC Transport team who are out there every single day working through this massive change. The first BRT to LRT conversion in the world. Never been done before. No playbook to follow. So 5 years of changes, well thought out, great strategy. Our team today, after my opening comments and a few introductory slides, will take you through a very detailed and, yes, lengthy presentation, and we will answer your questions. So, Mr. Chair, I'd like to just start with another video as part of the We're Ready for Rail campaign. Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, the opening of the O-Train Line 1 will mark a historic, positive transformation in the way transit service is delivered in Ottawa. The shift goes from primarily a bus service to a multimodal operation with bus, diesel rail, electric rail, and paratransport services all being integrated into a multimodal operation. So in support of this goal and this massive change, we completed many years ago with our customers a journey mapping project to help put all of the interests of the customers at the heart of all our decisions. So every single decision we made, the customer was embedded in that process. And the result of that customer journey mapping highlighted what customers needed to know so that they are informed, educated, prepared, and excited for their journey on the system. So using the results from all that work with our customers and the focus groups, themes were drawn out, and the customer journey project, we identified their top 10 priorities and their topics, and here they are. This is what the customers told us they needed to be ready for rail. They want to know how the bus routes and the stations are connected. They want to know all the connection modes and how they get to the service. They want to understand the transfer zones, the fare paid zones. They want to know the frequency of service, the travel planner, how the ticket machines and the fare gates work. They want to know how the trains are configured, the capacity, the door, the boarding process, and so forth. And they wanted to know the accessibility features and the safety and security features. And I see a lot of councillors are tweeting that out, so I'm going to pause because that's a great slide to tweet out, because that is from your customers. That summarizes what they said they needed in order to be ready for rail. I'm going to walk you through all that. But I also want to identify something. Every single decision, every policy, every bylaw change, every procedure, we looked at all of these jurisdictions and looked at best practices, not only for how they were doing it, but we also asked them if they had to do it over again, because some of these have been running operations, multimodal operations, for decades and some 50, 60 years. And if they had to do it over again, what would they do differently? So we learned immensely from them, and I have to emphasize this. This isn't the first rail system in the world to be opened up. So we're not reinventing the wheel. We took best practices, we took the fundamentals, and we said, how do we make it even better? And great input from these folks, and I just wanted you to be aware that we applied this lens to every element that you're going to hear about today. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Scrimgeour, and we're going to go through a couple of presenters today, and then I'll conclude, and then we'll open up for questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, John. I'll start just by saying we'll try to walk through this as a customer would. Many customers are coming from different experiences and different approaches as they use the system, but over the next few slides we'll show you how a customer will experience the line. The line will be, it's an integral part of the complete OC Transpo network. It doesn't stand on its own. It connects 13 stations from Tiniest Pasture to Blair in this phase, and there's so many ways the customers can get to the train stations. 10 of the 13 stations have bus connections. The Line 2, the Trillium line, the O-Train service that's been in place for many years now, connects at Bayview Station. The stations are connected to the walking networks, the bicycling networks, so the people who are walking, people who are using wheelchairs, people who are using bicycles can come in on multi-use pathways, local streets, connected into pedestrian systems in downtown office buildings. There's so many ways of connecting. For those people who are connecting by bus, we'll talk a little here and a little bit more later. There's more than 100 bus routes from every neighborhood of the city that connect directly to Line 1. There's 11 rapid bus routes, 36 connection routes that come straight from people's neighborhoods that will bring people from park and ride lots or from the neighborhood straight to a station on Line 1. There's 48 local bus routes that connect usually all day long, all week long, from neighborhoods all across the city directly to O-Train Line 1. The 16 park and ride lots all have a direct connection to the terminals of Line 1. And every residential area, as I said, has a direct connection. The bus routes that are now numbered between 5 and 99, the connection routes, which are numbered in the 200s, all connect to Line 1. And for the first time, we will be marking the destinations of every bus at the bus stops. So in every case, it will say not just the line number, the route number, but also the destination. And in almost every case, the destination of an inbound bus is a station on O-Train Line 1. This map shows what the city's rapid transit network will look like after O-Train Line 1 opens. You can see Line 1 in red, you can see Line 2 in green, but you need to remember that the rapid bus routes that are shown in blue that extend our service to the west, to the east, and to the south integrate completely with the O-Train lines to provide an excellent rapid transit service for everyone in Ottawa. Starting in the beginning of 2017, we've begun moving, and most routes have changed to a new number or a new identity. We've used the colors on the right to give customers information about the different service types, the rapid routes, the frequent routes, the connection routes, local routes, and the other types of routes that run for special purposes. And we've started to adapt the OC Transpo logo to the O-Train logo and make the bold red O in a lot more ways the identifier for OC Transpo service. And that shows up at the station entrances. People will be able to see a station entrance and know unambiguously what that station entrance is from a long way away as they see the illuminated red O or the backlit O that's on the back of the lantern that you see in the middle there. And that O theme, the red O, carries over many elements, individual signs in the station, and you see there on the left the segment of the red O on the new ticket machines. So as customers come into the station, once we've got them to the station by showing them the way with the red O, they come into the station and we start to give them information about how they find where to go within the station. The most important decision that people will make is, am I going east or am I going west? And that's what the signs at the top will show. It's that simple binary decision that people need to make when they come in the entrance to the station. And after they've done it a few times, it will become routine and they won't need to think about it at all. The sign at the bottom is the digital sign that will show the arrival time of the next two trains in the direction that a customer is traveling. The stations are quite impressive, quite remarkable. They're going to be the newest rapid transit systems in the world on the day they open, of course, and they are comparable in many, many ways to the best that we've seen anywhere in the world. The train platforms are very long, 100 meters long, Lots of room to board, even at busy times. There's there's channels beside, so it's a small detail, but it's a small little channel beside the steps on every stairwell so that people can walk a bicycle up and down. People who aren't using bicycles won't even notice it's there, but it removes a barrier for people who are walking with a bicycle. As people leave the station, we will have a map at the exit of every station that shows them the most important destinations that are within a few minutes walk, so they know, do I turn left, do I turn right, as they go out the front door of the station. Every station has elevators. Most of the stations have escalators to help people move from street level to platform level. There's public washrooms at 4 of the 13 stations. There's space for future retail operations at 4 of the 13 stations. When people are walking or cycling or using their mobility device to get to the station, there's so many ways they can get there. Every station is well connected to the pedestrian and cycling facilities that exist. Within the stations, for people leaving the stations, we'll have signage to direct people which way to turn, to go left, to go right, to go north, to go south. Stations have bicycle parking, and as I mentioned earlier, there's those channels beside the stairs so people can walk up and down the stairs with their bicycle easily. When people are walking with their bicycle, there's going to be a green area marked on the platform for people to wait for that train to come, and then there's information for them that they should board through the first door of the first car of the train and use the cooperative seating area to stand there with their bicycle. And of course, for cyclists, the rack and roll program on buses continues to be available during the warmer months from April to October, and people will easily be able to transfer with their bicycles from bus to train or train to bus. To come back to the customers who are connecting by bus, we've recognized all along, and this is a major part of the customer journey mapping and the Ready for Rail program, is that most customers' travel changes in some way with the opening of Line 1. About 2/3 of everyone who travels on OC Transpo will have a train as part of their trip from that first day. So that's more than 200,000 trips per day, which makes Line 1 of the O train the busiest light rail line in North America and comparable to the busiest light rail systems in North America. Our 13-kilometer line will carry almost as many people as 130 kilometers of line in Los Angeles. It will carry almost as many people as the entire light rail system in Boston, about 2/3 the number of the entire light rail line system in Calgary. This will be a very busy rapid transit line from the very first morning that it opens. Customers from the east will transfer at Blair Station, a station that's been designed specifically for that purpose. Customers who are traveling from places like Alta Vista, Greenboro, Vanier can transfer at Saint Laurent Station, an existing busy station that's been adapted for trains, or Herdman Station, a station that's been completely renovated as a major transfer station. And people from Stittsville, Canada, Barrhaven, and much of Nepean will transfer at Tunney's Pasture Station, a station that's also built and designed specifically for the large transfer volumes. It'll be a very, very busy station, but it's a station that'll be busy only until Stage 2 extensions occur within a few years. So it's built to be adaptable for the future. And as I mentioned earlier, O-Trains Line 1 and 2 connect with a very easy connection just up a few stairs at Bayview Station. At 3 of the stations, Blair, Herdman, and Tunney's Pasture, the bus loops and the train platforms are integrated into a single fare-paid zone, another one of the best practices that we've adopted from other transit agencies. So as people change from bus to train in the morning, train to bus in the afternoon, they don't need to queue up, they don't need to go through a fare barrier, they don't need to tap a card as they get on the bus, they don't need a proof of payment on board the train. It's as easy as we can make it. Inside these big stations, the arrival bus stops for people arriving by bus, mostly in the morning, are very close to the stairs that go down to platform level, or up to platform level in the case of Herdman and Blair. The departure stops are more spread out, and they're grouped. So at Tunney's Pasture, for instance, if you're going southwest to Barhaven, you'd go one way. If you're going west to Canada or Stittsville, you'd go another way. And then the bus routes are spread out along those long platforms. So there's no more of the experience that people have today at somewhere like Metcalfe, where everyone waits in one spot and has to look to see when their bus is coming. They're spread out, they're designated spots. There'll still be multiple routes at each stop, but there's room to stand, there's safe and comfortable places to wait, and there will be electronic information showing the scheduled times of the next trips to come to that stop. I mentioned earlier transferring and the concept of the fare paid zone. Every station has a fare paid zone. From the moment you go through a fare gate, you're in a fare paid zone. You can board the train as you wish. You don't need to queue up. There's no one to see as you get on the train. There's no one passing through the train checking the fares. When you're in, you're in. I mentioned earlier how easy it is to transfer at Blair, Herdman, and Tunney's. They're big stations. It still takes time to walk to your bus stop, but there's no need for another fare transaction. In the afternoon or on any outbound trip, when the buses pull up to the platform, all the doors will open, and people can board through all the doors, which means on an articulated bus, 3 doors open, that bus will be able to fill with its full load of 60, 70 people in less than a minute. For a double-decker bus, 2 doors will open. It will take a little longer, might take a minute and a half, but so much faster than if everyone had to get on the front door and tap a card. Also at Bayview Station, it's hard to show it in pictures, it's hard to describe it in words. It's so integrated when we all get to see the station. It's arrive on one train, up or down a set of stairs or an escalator, and the other train will be right there waiting. Here's a picture of conceptually how a fare paid zone is laid out at Herdman Station. The blue line shows the edge of the station. Most of that is fenced. Some of that has other barriers. People who get off buses can walk directly to the train platforms. People who get off trains can walk directly to the bus platforms. People who are getting off one bus route can change to another bus route. They don't need to walk through any fare barrier. They're inside this zone. But people who are coming in from the outside, people who are getting dropped off at the passenger pickup and drop-off, people who are cycling in or walking in from nearby, go through the fare gates that are shown here in the yellow area, and that brings them into the fare paid zone where they can catch any train or any bus. Lyon Station is another very important station. That's the key point where we'll be connecting to STO services to Gatineau. And the station and the streets downtown have all been configured to make Lyon Station a very effective transfer point for people who are transferring to go to Gatineau or people who are coming in from Gatineau. Some STO services will still make connections at Tunney's Pasture Station, but most STO services will come through Lyon Station. And then when they do that, some of them will also loop to Parliament Station for people who are destined to points near Bank Street who don't need to ride the O train, and some of those STO services will continue across Albert and Slater to get to Mackenzie King Bridge for people who are going to Rideau Centre, Department of National Defence, University of Ottawa, so those people can still ride their STO service directly without needing to use an OC Transpo service. We have, possibly uniquely in the world, certainly uniquely in Canada, we've had for many, many years complete fare integration between the STO and OC Transpo. People who start their trip on one system can transfer with their bus transfer or with their monthly pass or the U-Pass and make a trip on the other transfer. There's no second fare to be paid. There's no queuing up and going through another barrier, as everyone in Toronto who travels from Mississauga or off a GO train onto the TTC would be familiar with. We've had that arrangement for 40 or more years, and that continues. The STO multi-cards can be tapped at the fare gates, and they work perfectly. Someone who gets off an STO bus will have a transfer with a barcode on it. They scan it at the fare gate, and they can go directly into the O-train station. And the same in the reverse direction. People will tap their card, show their ticket or transfer to the operator on the STO bus. O-Train Line 1 has some of the best hours of service of any rapid transit system in North America. The first trains, Monday to Friday, will be at 5 in the morning. That's earlier than the service starts on the subway in Toronto that's earlier than the service starts in the metro in Montreal. And that allows people there's a lot of people who go to work early, they have service for them as soon as they're going. Late at night, our last trains from Monday to Thursday will be at 1 o'clock, later on Fridays at 2 o'clock, which the 2 o'clock closure is also later than most rapid transit systems in North America. Saturdays we'll open a little later. We open at 6, close again at 2 in the morning. And Sundays is the day where we've got shorter hours, opening at 8 in the morning, closing at 11 at night, which gives the hours of service to our contract maintainer to keep the line in good shape and to do any important maintenance work that they have to do in those longer overnight hours. Trains will arrive at the station every 5 minutes or less at peak times, very frequently through the middle of the day, and every 15 minutes or better after 11 p.m. Monday to Thursday, and more frequently than every 15 minutes on Fridays and Saturdays. And we keep the frequent service going Monday to Thursday until after the night classes are over at the universities and colleges, so that there's good frequent service until the ridership drops down. Travel time end to end is, as you've heard before, under 25 minutes, but for most people along the route, it's much less than that because they'll be making a shorter trip. It's a very quick trip. And overnight, during those few hours when the trains are not running, we will have rapid buses extended right into downtown, so people can make their trip and move from station to station or leave from Rideau Street after they've been downtown late, just as we're familiar with routes 95 and 97 today. For a few weeks now, we've had the Ready for Rail Travel Planner in its test version up and available on octransport.com, and customers have been using that to plan out their trips, to see what their options will be in the future. The Travel Planner is a great piece of software because it doesn't just tell you, here's how you should travel. It shows you what the choices are. You might not take the first option. You might prefer to walk a little further to have a more frequent trip, or a trip that comes a little sooner. You might prefer to go a little further so that your walking distance as you make a connection or you go to your final destination is more appropriate to your own needs. The options are all shown there when you use this at the top of the page. And these trains are so frequent that a difference of a minute or two, people who transfer starting their trip at 7:15 in the morning might get a different set of solutions for their particular trip than someone who's planning a trip at 7:20 or 7:30 in the morning. But for people who are just simply traveling to downtown, as the majority of our customers do, it's going to remain the same experience as today. Go to your bus stop where you know there's frequent service, catch that trip at the time that you know it comes. It'll take you to Tunney's or Blair or Herdman or Saint Laurent or any other station, and you go upstairs or downstairs, and that train will be along incredibly quickly. It'll be there within seconds. We showed you earlier a little picture of the ticket machines. The ticket machines that are installed at O-Train stations are the most advanced ticketing machines that are available in the market. They're ahead of what anyone else in North America has installed. And they can help customers to complete any routine fare transaction. People will be able to load up their Presto card with a monthly pass or add their stored value to their e-purse. They can buy a new Presto card. They can buy a single ride fare at any fare type, adult, senior, child. They can buy a single day pass. They can buy a multi-day pass. They can buy a family day pass on weekends. They can check the status of their Presto card. And if they've got any questions with that, they can push a button and within a few seconds be connected to an OC Transport customer service representative who can walk them through the transaction and help them to see how the machine works, and can help them to, if there's any problem, can resolve that problem for them. Of course, customers can continue to visit prestocard.ca to do any transactions with their Presto card. They can continue to visit the city client service centers. As of last year, we expanded to dozens of Shoppers Drug Mart, Loblaws, and Real Canadian Superstore locations across the city. And there's still the 4 OC Transpo customer service centers for people who need a little deeper help or need a little more information or help with their fares or any other OC Transpo service. In the span of a year and a half, we will have gone from, I recall it was about 10 locations where people could get a Presto card topped up to over 100 in every community of the city by the time we're done. So this is what the ticket machines look like. Excuse me. They're simple to use. They're easy to follow through the steps. The instructions are all there on the screen. Everything comes up in the language of the customer's choice. Everything is there clearly on the screen. If people need audio help, they can get it. If people who have visibility impairments can either use the braille lettering, can use the raised lettering, they can plug in their earphone into the audio jack, and they can get all the information. And everything is set at a height that can be used by someone who's in a wheelchair. When people have their fare, whether it's a single ride ticket that they've just bought at the ticket machine, a transfer they've got when they boarded a bus, or their smart card, they walk to the entrance of the station and the fare gates will be right there for them. The fare gates, there's wide banks of fare gates which are calibrated to the volume of people we'll be expecting to see through each entrance. Smaller entrances still have 4 fare gates. The big entrances, you'll be amazed at how big the entrances are into Parliament and Lyon Stations when you get the chance to be there. Here's a view of Lyon Station. You can see on the left and on the right, the fare gates are wider. Those are the wide fare gates where people can go through if they're using a mobility device, if they're bringing luggage, if they're bringing their bicycle, if they're using a stroller with their children. And those wider fare gates also have another fare card reader at a lower level for someone who's in a wheelchair that they can more easily tap, and they don't need to find a way to reach up onto the top of the gate to tap their smart card. When people are coming out from the fare stations, you just walk to the fare gate and the gates open automatically. There's no transaction needed. Nothing needs to be tapped or scanned. Here's a picture of what it looks like. On the left, you can see somebody tapping a smart card at the reader on the top. And on the right, you can see a picture of somebody scanning a single ride ticket. That's also where you'd scan a transfer if you're getting off a bus. And if anyone's had the opportunity to ride O-Train Line 2, the Trillium Line, in the last year and a half, we've been working all the bugs out on this system since November 17, and it's gone very, very well there. The fares that people are paying, just as a reminder, the fares are the same on the trains and the buses. It's an integrated part of the complete system. There's no change to the fare structure. The fare policy changes were made by Transit Commissioner Council in 2016, implemented shortly thereafter, and those remain in place. Fares can be paid directly at the fare gates by people who are walking up with a pass or walking up with a stored value on their Presto card. They don't need to go to a ticket machine. People can go to the ticket machine if they need to buy a single ride ticket or a day pass, and they can pay for it there by cash, by credit card, by debit card. For seniors who are traveling on the free days, Wednesdays now and Sundays starting on July 1st, they need to have a Presto card that's registered to them and set with that discount. It doesn't need to be registered to them. It needs to be set with the senior's discount, and when they tap it at the fare gate on Sundays or on Wednesdays, the gate will open and no debit will be made, no charge will be made against their e-purse. When they board the bus, they still, as they do today, speak directly to the bus operator. For children who are up to 5 years old, adults who are with those children may carry the children through the fare gates, or the adults can get free single ride tickets for the children if they need a separate ticket while they buy their single ride tickets, or if there's any case where they need to, they can come to the Rideau Center, Customer Service Center, and talk to our staff there about getting a special smart card for that child. I'll talk a little bit about the train. The trains are big inside. They're very long. It's a 2-car train, each car being almost 50 meters long. So in itself, each car is bigger than those brand new streetcars you see in Toronto. And then we couple 2 of them together. It's a very long train. It's got enough room for 600 people. It's got enough room to carry between the same number of people as between 6 and 7 articulated buses. So it's almost a city block's worth of people, almost that long, getting onto one train. And it's easy to get on and off of those trains. 14 double doors on each side of the train mean that everyone can get in quickly and get out quickly. Inside the train, we've got an announcement system so that the next station is announced, comes up on the screen, comes over the PA system. The customers are told which direction the train is going, what the destination is. We've got audio tones and announcements that will tell when the doors are opening and when the doors are closing so people can stay clear. We'll have maps of the system inside all of the trains. And when the train comes into a station, like on line 2, when the train comes to a stop, the green lights around the button on the doors light up. People can push that button and the doors will open. And at busy stations and at busy times, our operators will open all the doors for people to get on and off as quickly as possible. The trains are specifically designed for our climate of cold winters and hot summers. They've got more insulation than would otherwise be there. They've got double glazed windows. There's heated floors, and they're all air conditioned. There's all kinds of ways that they're safe. Some of the highlights about keeping it safe are there's passenger intercoms for anyone who's got trouble or sees trouble or wants to communicate and push the emergency intercom, talk directly to the train operator. These trains are 100% low floor. There's no steps. You can move directly from the platform into the train, or from the train to the platform, or back and forth within the train. There's no steps to worry about losing your balance. There's grab bars everywhere to people to hold on, and they're all brightly colored, so people with reduced visibility will still be able to find them. And the floors are all designed to be low glare, so it's clear to see. They're slip resistant. There's marked areas that the color of the floor is different in the areas around the cooperative seating, where people in wheelchairs or people who are bringing luggage or bringing bicycles on would move. So that'll alert people that that's a special area. Environmentally friendly trains, as you know, 100% electric with obviously zero emissions from the train, but also a regenerative braking system so that as a train decelerates, it's putting electricity back into the system that another train elsewhere on the line can pick up and use as it's accelerating. The trains have many, many accessibility features. I mentioned earlier the cooperative seating areas beside every single train door. The bright yellow grab bars, which people can reach from anywhere within the train. The door controls, those intercoms that I talked about to get in touch with the operator, are all at accessible heights. Slip-resistant floors, the low glare floors for people with disabilities that assists with. I mentioned earlier the audio announcements and the video announcements confirming the direction of travel, where the next station is, and what the destination of the train is. Digital signs to do the same, and the audio tones to advise people when the doors are opening and closing. The stations also have many, many accessibility features. There's dual elevators. There's backup elevators at every station. If there's ever an occasion that one elevator is out of service for maintenance or because there's been a mechanical problem with it, the other one right beside it is there and available. There's level entry boarding between the platform and the train. All of our signage is available not only in a visual form, but also in a braille and a tactile form for people who need that, the information provided to them in that way. There's wayfinding strips on the floor that are cane detectable, so anyone who's using a white cane to walk through can find their way using the tactile direction, and then you can see in this picture the warnings that show the platform edge, all in a format that is an international standard. There's also intercar barriers, the place where the two cars of the train couple. There's a barrier to stop people from inadvertently walking or putting a hand or a foot in the area where the two trains are connected, the two cars are connected. I mentioned earlier the accessible fare gates, everything at the fare gates with card readers at different heights, and the visual and audio feedback to let the customers know that their fare was successfully read. And the ticket machines are also, as I mentioned earlier, fully accessible. As we open the line, We will have hundreds of staff in every station through all the hours of the day to help people with any questions they have, making the transition from their previous travel arrangements to the new travel arrangements, answering the questions with any questions they have about how the revised bus routes work, how the train works, where they should go for anything. These people will be everywhere, and they'll be easily identifiable by the bright red O vests that they're wearing, which you can see at the top right. And continuing on, after the introductory period, there's many ways for customers at the stations to get in touch with the OC Transpo staff. They can use the video chat on the ticket machines. There's information phones just near the entrances to every station, and there's an information button on the payphone that will be on every platform. So there's many ways of getting in touch with OC Transpo just for information. And then our customer service will be available in many, many ways, not only at the launch, but for the longer term. The travel planning, the schedules, and the fares, that information is all available at octranspo.com. The real-time information is available on the transit information screens that will be in the stations, or through the OC Transpo iPhone app, or we provide the data through the city's open data service to the many independent apps that pick up that data. And of course, we have the 560-560 texting service. We put out service alerts to customers who subscribe by email or text for the routes they're interested in, or we put those alerts out also on the Twitter feeds, OC Transpo Live and OC Transpo Direct. And our general information is always going out at the Twitter feed, OC_Transpo. As I've mentioned a couple of times, people can get in touch with our customer service staff by using the video chat on the ticket machines. They can always come in person to the 4 customer service centers at the Rideau Centre and at Place d'Orléans, Saint-Laurent, and Lincoln's Field stations. They can phone for transit information at 741-4390 by pressing the information button on any payphone in the stations, or the information phones that I mentioned that are near the ticket machines and the fare gates. People who have trouble with lost and found, have lost an article, or they want to be reconnected with something left behind, call us at 563-4011. And for customers who have experienced a safety problem, who have seen a safety problem, or have a concern about anything, let OC Transpo know, and they can call our special constables at 741-2478, or they can always use the online incident reporting tool at octranspo.com. And again, we were the first transit agency to allow people to report problems like that anonymously through the online incident reporting tool. Now, after the train opens, we will have a transition period of about 3 weeks when the trains are open and the buses are still following their current route. People can move over the first day, the second day, when they're comfortable to do so. We'll continue to have the crosstown routes like 95, 94, continuing to travel through downtown for that 3-week period, but connecting with the major Line 1 stations along the way. And the connection routes will continue to go downtown until most of the people have switched over to train, and then we'll be able to peel those connection routes back to just terminate at Tunney's, Herdman, and Blair. So that bus service will continue for that period, and we'll be there. Our customer service staff will be there through that whole period to help people with the change that comes with the opening of the train and the subsequent change that comes with the changes to the bus route network about 3 weeks later. Now I'll hand you over to my colleague Troy Charter, who will take you through some of the other features of the system.
Great. Thank you, Pat. Safety and security is at the forefront in the design and operations of the O-Train system. The principles of CPTED, or crime prevention through environmental design, and industry best practices from comparator transit properties have been implemented throughout in the vehicles, in stations, and on the bus platforms. To highlight a few of the safety and security features, all stations have an open concept design that allows for clear and open sight lines, and all stations and bus platforms are well lit. The trains are all equipped with emergency passenger intercoms, which you can see in the photo to the right. Both bus and train platforms have trans-secure waiting areas that are centrally located and are equipped with emergency telephones, otherwise known as ETELs. As well, throughout the system and on trains, CCTV cameras will enhance safety and will be monitored through the Transit Operations Control Center, which operates 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. In working with our emergency response partners and with other transit agencies, we have developed detailed operational and emergency evacuation plans that reflect each station, their unique features, and key elements along the track. In the event of an emergency, the trains have onboard passenger intercoms that will connect a customer directly with the operator of a train. Additionally, clear signage and audible announcements will direct customers on both trains and in stations to follow the evacuation procedures as well as the location of emergency exits. The O-Train system will also have dedicated special constables to patrol the entire length of the system, but it is important to note that there are also supervisors, customer service agents, and other rail operations staff who will be present and visible, which will further enhance safety and security. Emergency preparedness, a critical element of safety and security, as well as operational readiness, has been coordinated with the Office of Emergency Management, Ottawa Fire, Paramedic, and Police Services, OC Transpo, O-Train Construction, and the builders of the light rail line, the Rideau Transit Group. This cross-functional group oversaw the development, training, and practice exercises required to ensure a coordinated response to emergencies. Training that focused on the recognition of safety hazards unique to light rail and the safety protocols required in given situations has been completed by first responders and frontline operating staff. The photo that you see here is from the full-scale live exercise conducted in one of our downtown tunnel stations in September of 2018. This exercise gave staff the opportunity to put the training and learnings into action, and while it was a simulation, it took place using a real station with real vehicles and real people using the equipment that will be required to respond to an emergency. This exercise involved all the partners I previously indicated and was considered a major project milestone. In addition to the live exercise, there have been 8 tabletop exercises including all emergency response personnel, and there have been hundreds of technical drills and exercises conducted that have tested and validated our standard operating procedures, our contingency plans, and ultimately the customer experience. Combined, all these exercises and practices have been an effective way to familiarize all relevant emergency responders and OC Transpo staff with their roles, responsibilities, and actions if faced with an emergency. As we continue towards the launch of the LRT, we are in the final stages of completing our practice exercises and dress rehearsals. Staff are and will be prepared. The shift from a primarily bus-focused transportation network to a true multimodal network where a large number of customers will use a combination of bus and train to complete their journey requires an integrated approach to service delivery. Mr. Manconi has previously indicated that. This shift towards creating an integrated operation began years ago with the construction and integration of all modes of OC Transport service into one central operations control center. Construction was completed in the summer of 2017, and staff that managed conventional bus service, rail operations, paratranspo, special constables, transit fleet supervisors, and our customer service representatives are all now co-located. Our customers have told us loud and clear that they want to get to and from their destinations safely and reliably. The Integrated Control Center will centralize incident response, improves operational communications, and ultimately enhances the delivery of a service for our customers, ensuring a highly coordinated operational response at all times. Staff in the control room are able to do this by monitoring on-street activity, be it bus, rail, or paratranspo. They have the ability to allocate and manage resources while also being in direct communication with frontline staff. Regardless of mode, it is the control room that coordinates our operational response with all our frontline staff and also connects with other city partners to keep service moving. Control Center personnel are also closely linked with the Rideau Transit Maintenance, our long-term maintainer of vehicle, tracks, and systems. Control Center staff coordinate their response to any required activity affecting rail service or our customers. It may be a garbage can overflowing or more technical or operational element requiring attention. Regardless, day or night, maintenance activity along the rail line is coordinated through the Control Center. And as I've previously mentioned, included in the Control Center are members of our Special Constable Unit who monitor over 2,200 CCTV cameras, including over 1,200 added as a result of the launch of the light rail line. As you can see in the slide, there's 2 pictures here to give you a bit of sense of what the Control Center looks like. As you'll notice in the photos, the Control Center is a large, open concept room designed to promote communication and awareness of the service delivery of the other modes. In other words, conventional bus supervisors will be keenly aware of how service is operating in the rail line and vice versa. This increased awareness helps to ensure a seamless and coordinated approach to service. We know that to provide a good service to our customers, the bus relies on rail, and rail relies on bus. And the control center has been planned around that fundamental concept. In the photo on the left, you're looking at a few key aspects of the layout of the control center. On the left-hand side is where locations of the electric rail controllers who are monitoring the trains and systems, as well as all related equipment, elevators, escalators, and alarms. On the right-hand side of the photo is where the bus controllers who are overseeing the entire bus network. A control room manager is also located in this room and oversees the entire operation, all modes, and assists in coordinating response to service events. In the photo on the right-hand side, right-hand bottom side of the slide, this is where the special constable staff are located. As I mentioned, they monitor the CCTV cameras throughout the transit network, including rail, buses, parking ride lots, and stations. The communication officers in the special constable unit also dispatch special constable personnel accordingly and liaise with their partners in emergency services. As with any operation, there will be incidents that can affect our service. The design of the Confederation line, complemented by the operational procedures that have been developed to respond to both planned and unplanned events on the rail line, allows staff to respond in a timely and effective manner. The plans that have been developed are highly adaptable and ensure that any response is extremely coordinated and appropriately resourced. Potential incidents or events that may interrupt service is not something that is unique to Ottawa. All rail operations need plans. OC Transpo has engaged in best practice and standard operating procedure reviews with fellow transit agencies including Calgary, Montreal, Boston, just to name a few, and they've all been involved in the development in our response and service mitigation plans. Common best practices observed across transit agencies that have been incorporated into our plans include maintaining train service for as long as possible, providing timely, consistent, and continuous communication with customers and staff, and having established rail replacement plans managed by Service Command Center, or in our case, our control center. Not all events will require bus replacement. For example, the rail lines have crossovers which allow trains to move from one track to another at certain locations. This can allow trains to divert around an instant. Or, control center staff have the ability to adjust train frequencies and departure times in response to a short duration event. However, when a section of the rail line or the entire rail line is unavailable or is experiencing severe delays, replacement bus service will be provided. Control center and on-street staff have been trained on the bus replacement scenarios and are ready to respond. Key elements of the rail replacement bus service plans includes the identification of alternate bus stop locations, which will be clearly marked as R1 and will be located as close as possible to all train stations. Customers will be provided with information regarding the nature of the delay, as well as alternate transportation options. Alternate service plans, while providing a consistent and effective approach to managing events, will also be customized for every type, location, and time of incident, and the information communicated to customers will be tailored each time. And most importantly, we will have staff on site at stations and at the R1 bus stops to assist customers. It is important to note that in situations where bus service is required on a portion or the entire line, that buses do not have the same capacity as the trains, and buses will be interacting with general traffic, and as such will not be able to match the speed and reliability associated with the train. With that said, the goal of replacement bus service is to provide the best possible service to our customers through the use of our buses until the O train returns to normal operations. We have the plans and we have the means to achieve it. During any service disruption, customer communication is an important element of our plans. In keeping with that, our plans outline all the methods by which we will communicate and notify customers of service disruptions. This communication will be done through our various channels, as Pat had indicated, but it would, to repeat, through social media, text, email, alerts, and web updates. Public audio announcements will be made on board trains, buses, and at stations, and will inform customers of service disruptions, and will also assist customers in finding the appropriate bus stop. Visual messages will also be posted on transit information screens located at the entrance to train stations. An example of one of the customer information screens is located at the right of this slide. To the left of the transit information screen is an example of an R1 replacement bus stop flag. These will be permanently affixed to bus stops and posts, but depending on the circumstance, we may also use temporary signage and directional signage to assist customers. And on the left of the slide is an example of the messaging that customers would see on O-Train platforms. In any instance, when there is a change or disruption to service, OC's Transpo, as I mentioned, will be present to assist our customers. I'll now pass things over to my colleague, Kim McEwen.
Thank you, Troy. I'm excited to present an overview of the Ready for Rail campaign. It's our comprehensive information and education program for our customers. It provides them with information that will help them adapt to the network transformation and easily transition to their new multimodal journey. The Ready for Rail campaign began in April 2017 and has seen over 500,000 visitors to the Ready for Rail website, 29 million impressions through online ads, and more than 315 million impressions from ads on buses, bus shelters, and digital billboards. The campaign began with a graphic depiction of each of the 10 themes we've already outlined in this presentation. The graphic depictions are similar to the images that you see on the bottom of the slides in this presentation. Currently, the campaign is transitioning to live action depictions of these same 10 themes, and will also include a component that generates excitement closer to the launch date. We also have a comprehensive outreach program that has been ongoing since April 2017, where we've provided Ready for Rail presentations or materials at almost 200 events at schools, colleges, universities, workplaces, organizations, and community events. The campaign focuses on the 10 topics customers identified as a priority, and it's centered on questions related to each of these themes. Where will it go? Talks about the LRT route and stations. How often will it come? Outlines the frequency of service. How many will it carry? Talks about the train capacity and doors for quick and easy boarding. How will I get to it? Talks about the bus, cycling, and walking connections to the LRT stations. How will it change my trip? Encourages customers to try out the travel planner to see how Line 1 is integrated into the various options for their travel. Where will I buy my fare? Talks about the many features incorporated into the ticket machines. How will I get through the fare gate and how will I transfer? Outlines the process and how to transfer from bus to train, explains fare paid zones, and how to get through the fare gates. We also have themes outlining the features for accessibility, safety, and security. On this slide is an example of one of the themes, one of the questions, the graphic depiction that you may have seen on the left, and the live action depiction that we're currently transitioning to. This is a snapshot of one of the pages on the Ready for Rail website found on octranspo.com. This is the central location for all Ready for Rail information. There's a link to the Ready for Rail travel planner where customers can enter information and see the various travel options with Line 1 incorporated into their trip. Customers can familiarize themselves with station layouts and the train design by viewing the 360-degree virtual tours that we have posted on this page. Currently, we have a tour of Lyon Station and the interior of the train, and are developing other virtual tours as well. On these pages, there's also information about service types and route numbering, the new service map and details specific to communities and specific bus routes, name the train contest submissions and winners, and much more. There are also resources available on the Ready for Rail website that people can download and print. For example, there's an overview of the Confederation line. There's specific rail terminology that may be new for our customers. There's frequently asked questions, and there's Ready for Rail activity sheets for children. Ready for Rail uses multiple channels and tools to reach as many customers as possible. In the next few days, councillors will receive a link to materials focused on the 10 Ready for Rail themes. In that package, there will be articles that can be used in newsletters and blogs. There will be key messages, sample tweets, Facebook posts, the graphics associated with each of the 10 themes, and short 15-second videos. Ready for Rail staff are also available to attend events or select meetings that councillors may be hosting, where we can set up information booths, hand out materials, and speak to residents about their new multimodal journey. Over the next few weeks and until launch, Ready for Rail messaging will roll out in many locations and through a variety of channels. You will see photos, videos, and messages on close to 100 video screens on City Hall, in rec centres and libraries, on 70 bus shelters and over 1,500 ads on buses, onboard bus announcements and social media platforms such as ottawa.ca, octranspo.com, Facebook, and our Twitter feeds will also promote Ready for Rail messaging. As well, bike racks at various locations throughout the city will have Ready for Rail messaging. These are mainly located in the core, Centretown, and the Byward Market. Ads with information about the 10 Ready for Rail themes will be placed in many print, online, and digital forums, again, to reach as many customers as possible. Print ads will appear in multilingual local newspapers, post-secondary school newspapers, and other publications. Combined, these publications have a total circulation of over 300,000. We will also place ads on media websites and social media platforms for an estimated 40 million impressions. These online ads will be seen by people accessing these websites and platforms on a desktop computer or a mobile device. We can also geo-target the ads to individuals who are on their mobile devices while at or near a transit hub. Ready for Rail messaging will also appear on digital billboards throughout the city, in elevators in downtown core office buildings, and on various local English and French radio stations. And Ready for Rail video segments will appear on over 100 screens in theaters prior to a start of a movie, resulting in over 30,000 broadcasts. Finally, we will mail information to every address in the city on 2 occasions. Just prior to the launch of Line 1, the mail-out will include information on using the light rail system and route information targeted to specific areas of the city. Prior to the end of the transition period that Pat spoke about, the mail-out will include a reminder about the route changes. As mentioned previously, we've been conducting Ready for Rail outreach since April 2017 and continue to do so at key public locations, events, and workplaces. We will continue to host information booths or provide presentations for elementary, secondary, and post-secondary schools, major employers, community associations, businesses, and BIAs near the O train. In the coming weeks, we have several outreach booths or presentations booked, others currently being scheduled, and are working with many organizations to assess their interest in having a Ready for Rail booth or presentation. We also have information that can be included in organizers' or employer newsletters. And again, as stated earlier, Ready for Rail staff are available to attend events or select meetings that councillors that may be hosting. Thank you. That concludes the overview of the Ready for Rail customer education campaign.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One last slide, and it's a very important piece of information. So the 10 elements that we talked about our customers, what they've asked for, and then these are the 5 key messages for all our customers that we want them to remember. They're very important. Number 1, don't run for the train. Walk. It's very frequent service. Safety is paramount. Number 2, the number 1 cause of train delays in the world is people holding the doors. Do not hold the doors. You'll cause delays to the train system. Number 3, if you drop something into the tracks, do not attempt to pick it up. We will retrieve your item for you. It is not safe to do that in any way. Number 4, allow people to exit the train. Those of you that have used systems around the world, it's not only polite, but it's also very efficient boarding and egress for the train operation. And number 5, if you need our help, we're there to help. Look for OC Transpo staff. You've heard all the ways that you can connect up with us or seek us. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That concludes, as I warned you, a very lengthy, detailed presentation. And we now open it up for your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Manconi, and thank you to your staff. It's clear that you've made a lot of progress on getting us ready for this transition that's about to happen here in the city to LRT. I think where we'll go first is to delegations, and we only have one. It's Trevor Hache. So I'll ask if one or two of the members of your staff want to just move over to the side for this. You got the timer, good.
Good afternoon, morning, Chair Hubley and members of the Transit Commission. Thank you to staff for that excellent presentation. It's certainly exciting to know that we're hopefully going to see this open this year. And yeah, the video was great. The music was exciting. I just wanted to sort of address some concerns about the reliability of the system. I read through the report. The current bus rider is obviously facing a lot of challenges right now, and we're going to get snow again next winter probably, and I'm just wondering what is going to be done to ensure that things are improving from a customer point of view. I know that today's report talks about how we should be taking care of our customers at every step of the way. Many of our members within the Healthy Transportation Coalition were really negatively impacted by changes to bus routes getting ready for LRT, specifically bus routes 11 and 12. And I'm interested in learning more and wonder if staff could shed some lights on what the plans are to address some of those concerns. I know there was some money in the budget, and I'm interested in knowing when those concerns are going to be addressed specifically. Councillor Fleury was here earlier and mentioned that there's a new bus route 15 coming to Montreal Road. Many of our members in the Bay Ward area are also concerned about bus route 11, and I understand that maybe there might be some improvements coming there too, so that's great. Would love some more light shed on that if possible. I think the city should really be looking at, to improve the reliability of the bus system, which will be feeding into the new light rail, the need for many more bus-only lanes on existing roads, especially during the rush hours. And wondering also, I ride the bus in from Canada every day. The bus that I catch at Hazeldean and Terry Fox is consistently late during rush hour by 10 to 15 minutes, and I wonder whether or not a hub-and-spoke system with the existing transit way, so we're sending less buses 20 to 30 kilometers across the city, would be something that would improve the customer experience. Also, we heard in this report that there was some thought given to improving pedestrian and cycling connections to the LRT stations, which is great. Some of these concerns we've addressed to council and staff previously is that essentially there are many historically disadvantaged lower income neighborhoods in Ottawa that aren't going to benefit from the billions of dollars that are being invested in light rail stages 1 or 2. And so we're asking the question, how are these neighborhoods' concerns going to be addressed? Is there any way the city's limited funding to improve pedestrian and cycling infrastructure could be prioritized to these historically disadvantaged neighborhoods so that their connections to the closest light rail station could be made better? So certainly I think that needs some attention, and I'm not sure that it's getting that attention yet. We've shown this map before from an article published in the Ottawa Citizen that specifically shows those neighborhoods that aren't super well connected or close by to an LRT 1 or 2 station. And these are the places highlighted in red that I think need some special attention. The city staff in cycling also did a connectivity scoring at one point in the last couple of years that showed there are some of these neighborhoods that are particularly poorly served, and current plans don't seem to address that. So we'd love it if staff could better focus on addressing the needs of the people living in these historically disadvantaged neighborhoods, with the pedestrian and cycling connections being improved in an expedited, prioritized way if possible. We learned yesterday of close to $57 million in more money coming from the federal government, and the mayor was quoted in the Ottawa Citizen saying he expects the money will be used to lessen the cost of the debt that the city is taking on related to building stage 2 of LRT. And I just wonder, given that that's a $57 million present that the federal government is providing, should all of City Council not be involved in an open and public discussion about how to use that money? And thank you.
30 seconds left.
And if so, what are some of the things that could be done? So could that money, for example, free up money elsewhere in the budget to improve the customer experience? We know that transit riders have been having a very bad time lately in terms of the reliability not being there. So what could be done to address that now that we have a $57 million opportunity? And there are various points there that suggest maybe some of these things could be looked at: building more bus-only lanes, launching an electric bus pilot project, and finally, what could be done to improve reliability. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions for the delegation? Councillor Brockman?
I don't have a question, but I want to provide some information to the delegate about his presentation, because Mr. Hache has identified the Carlington neighborhood as one of the neighborhoods that he claims will not be served by LRT when LRT opens. The Carlington neighborhood will be benefiting from LRT. There's been a number of consultations in the ward, particularly in the Caldwell-Carlington neighborhoods, about bus route changes that will be happening. People who take Route 14 right now as an example, who need to go downtown, take a crosstown route that is often delayed because it is on streets only. It goes through a number of neighborhoods, including the detours on Elgin Street. And the new route will be going directly to Tunney's Pasture. So with people who need to get downtown, there will actually be a net decrease of the time that they'll be taking on the buses. Through my consultations, people were concerned that it's not just traveling to downtown, but there's the benefit of the 14 is it connects neighborhoods. It's a neighborhood connector, and even if you're not going downtown, there's a reliance on the 14 because it provides that type of service. So again, working with the community, we have retained daytime service that will shadow the current Route 14 and provide people with that service as well. So I just wanted to correct for the record that yes, this part of my ward has a fair number of challenges, but through working with OC Transpo and the community, not only are they getting better service to get to the LRT station at Tunney's Pasture and to use the LRT to get downtown, we've retained that inner neighborhood service during the day, and I want to credit OC Transpo for working with the community on that. I think it's important.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Kavanagh.
Thank you very much. I want to thank the delegate for his questions, because he's raised some important issues in terms of poorer communities and connectivity. One of the ones he mentioned was Route 11, but we've already heard from OC Transport that they are returning to bring the route back to Bayshore, and I really appreciate them listening to that and hearing from residents, and it's going to go forward. I guess the big question is when. It's the big when, and we're all waiting for that. And of course, that question will come up, and we won't get an answer until they're good and ready. But it is very much hurting our neighborhood right now. I appreciate the comments from my colleague about the importance of local routes as well, the importance of the fact that people need to get around their neighborhoods, not just downtown. This is the LRT is routed towards downtown. So I just wanted to get that out there because it's important to remind people that that has been addressed, and I'm really appreciative of it. It's just a matter of getting it going. None of us are happy about delays. But I just wanted to ask specific questions. One, how do you see electric buses working within the system? It's something that we should address later on once we get the LRT rolling. And two, about what kind of connectivity do you see for some of our more challenged neighborhoods?
Thank you. We're collaborating with the Electric Vehicle Council of Ottawa as well as Ecology Ottawa to encourage the city to move forward with an electric bus pilot project. We know that LRT won't serve every area of the city, at least initially. Canada and Stittsville, Barrhaven, etc. are waiting until stage 3. So there are no doubt going to be routes that will feed into the transitway, routes that will feed into the new light rail that could accommodate, I think, a short bus trip that an electric bus should be piloted on. We know that Toronto right now is engaged in a pilot project, and Montreal and Vancouver. There are many Canadian cities that are moving forward in this direction. And so in the municipal election, the mayor had a platform that included a commitment to an electric bus pilot project. So we're just trying to encourage that to happen fairly quickly. We think the city should test 3 different models of electric buses and see which ones perform best based on local conditions, rather than picking one bus and having it not turn out great. It'd be good to have a number of different options. With regard to the connectivity to the specific neighborhoods that our analysis and the city's own analysis has shown are poorly connected with regard to pedestrian and cycling infrastructure, and how that pedestrian and cycling infrastructure connects to the LRT stations. We think that the city's analysis and our analysis has shown where those areas are lacking. And I listed on the slides some specific neighborhoods that need attention. So with regard to Councillor Brockington's point, we weren't necessarily saying that neighborhoods weren't being served by the LRT or that buses wouldn't be connecting to the LRT stations. What we're saying is that there are neighborhoods that we've identified and staff have recognized that are not receiving many planned investments in terms of pedestrian and cycling improvements. Those neighborhoods are historically disadvantaged, and we'd like to see the city's limited dollars directed toward addressing those historical injustices in a way. We know, for example, the Glebe is a very wealthy neighborhood. People there are in positions in their life that they can get very involved in terms of advocacy for cycling lanes. Not every neighborhood has the same dynamics as the Glebe, and so we want to ensure that the limited dollars that the city has to make cycling and pedestrian connections to LRT a priority, that those go toward addressing those historically disadvantaged places of the city.
Councillor McKenna.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick comment and a question. We know that the light rail system obviously, skirts through the downtown. It will bring, as Councillor Kavanagh mentions, people in from east-west and south into the downtown, but it will still leave in most instances a hike to get to where you want to go, it's always, for me, as soon as I started to think about light rail coming into the downtown and what that would do to shift the way people move through the downtown to relieve congestion, it seemed to me that, if you could arrive, if there was a bike share program and segregated bike infrastructure that could get you around. Tree canopy would be nice too, and all of the things that help us breathe and move around safely and in a healthy way. So I'm also very interested in the $56.7 million that was announced yesterday. And I also am quite anxious to have that conversation as an elected official. But I did note that, and I agree with many of your points on how we can enhance our system through enhanced infrastructure with that money. But healthy transportation, is that something that you would be in favor of having throughout the city, certainly where light rail brings people in, to have that type of bike share program that we can. It works. Obviously Toronto's got less harsh winters, but we can cycle here throughout the winter. But certainly people who aren't comfortable winter cycling can still cycle for 8-9 months comfortably if they have that infrastructure. Is that something that you would, as the Healthy Transportation Coalition, be in favor of?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the city does have a private vendor right now, or operator business that does have a bike share program. There have been non-profit models that have, tried in Ottawa and may no longer be functioning. But we see tremendous potential for people riding bikes or walking to the rapid transit stations. And if the disbursement of those bike sharing racks were greater and specifically targeted towards some lower income places, and perhaps some of that $57 million could be used to subsidize membership in a bike share program for lower income folks in a targeted way. I know there have been examples of cities that have tried to integrate a bike sharing system with the transit very effectively. So you could tap your Presto card, for example, to unlock a bike, take it to the LRT, park it there. And then some cities have also integrated a car sharing mechanism into that in lower income social housing, for example, where there's a car share so people can avoid the cost of the insurance and the maintenance of owning their own car, have more money for healthy food and things like that. So that integration and that targeted approach of those funds to those historically disadvantaged neighborhoods, we would love to see very much.
Thank you, Councillor McKinney. Mr. McConey, would you like to add anything? Thank you, Mr. Hachette, for your delegation. Mr. McConey, would you like to add anything to that?
Yeah, sure. Just for clarification, I think some of the information that was conveyed, needs correcting. Number one, it's not a hub-and-spoke system, and Mr. Hachette knows that. He has hundreds of interactions with Mr. Scrimgeour and myself, and things like that. And I'm not challenging the speaker. I think it's important. We spent a lot of time taking care of our customers in this presentation, and so I want to make sure the right terminology is out there. In terms of the routes, thank you to both councillors. We have said over and over again, and I think everybody in the City of Ottawa knows that you've invested $5.1 million in the budget to do those connectivities, and we've consulted with every councillor, and we're adjusting accordingly. In terms of the downtown core, Councillor McKinney has been very articulate with me in terms of, does bus service remain in the core so that you don't have to have that hike that you speak about? And the answer is yes to that. And in terms of the snow and the reliability, we're not going to get into that today. I don't know where that statement about the system is unreliable. I'm pushing back because really we have to move on. And you've heard me over and over again do the most difficult thing that a leader has to do, and that's to deliver bad news. And I've delivered the delay news over and over again. And so having comments out there floating around that the system is unreliable with no evidence is something that I just don't want to have floating out there on a day that we're supposed to be talking about building confidence about how we're going to take care of our customers every step of the way. So I offer to Mr. Hachette, who's on working groups with me, to come and talk to me about if he has issues and concerns about reliability, to come and see me, and we'll gladly talk to him about that. But I'm not going to leave a comment about a general comment that the system is going to be unreliable out there. That's simply not right on a day when we're trying to get information out to our customers. And so thank you for giving me the opportunity on that. And lastly, in terms of, we have a brand, it's OC Transpo, and when I hear the word injustice infused in with our transit service, I think as the leader you want me to comment on that. We are here to take care of every single resident in this community. We have applied the equity and inclusion lens on every single thing we've done. We've done record levels of investments on this LRT, better than most systems in North America, to ensure they're safe, reliable, and so forth. So I'm just reacting to some of those comments because I think it's important that we remind everybody of how much we care for every single person in this community, irrespective of their status in the community and so forth. So it's Mr. Hache can come and talk to me anytime. He speaks to Mr. Scrimgeour on a regular basis. So obviously there's some disconnects, and I'm just offering that to him to come and see us.
Thank you, Mr. Manconi. We're going to go to questions of staff now. I know Mr. Hache is registered to speak to other items. I'm going to ask him to maybe review those comments that he wants to make in light of what Mr. Manconi just added. And so now we will go to questions, starting with Councillor Brockington.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, staff, for your detailed presentation. Mr. Manconi, you do not have to apologize to us for addressing issues. Feel free to speak your mind. And again, thank you all for the detail. I think this was the most detailed presentation. I've been coming to FEDCO, obviously, for the updates. But thank you. Since our last FEDCO meeting, has there been any movement to revise the estimates of when LRT-1 will be ready?
We're doing everything that we talked about at FEDCO, testing and commissioning. I don't want to get into detailed FEDCO-related matters, but is going very, very well. We have 20 trains out on the line today. We had 19 last week. I'm sure you've seen the tweets, the videos, the positive energy from the community on that. And again, we're not going to go through all the critical elements, but all of the critical elements are progressing well. And as the mayor has said, we will bring updates to FEDCO, or if there's a major development, we'll certainly let council know. So things are progressing well in the testing and commissioning. And we did have a snowstorm last week. You remember 7 centimeters of snow, wet snow, on a very short period of time. And the trains performed, all 19 of them were running through that storm and did what they were supposed to do.
That's great to hear. Thank you for that. I would like to focus, a lot of my questions that I had pre-written were addressed in the staff presentation, which is great. I want to focus a little bit on stations, on the stations itself. You talked about the big O, the big red O's that we see dotted around the city. Can you tell me, will there be signage, wayfinding signage on private property abutting our station? So within the Byward Market, within the Rideau Centre, on Spark Street, at the University of Ottawa, what influence do we have to get signage that is at sort of high volume areas to direct people to our actual stations?
Mr. Chair, there's about 3 approaches we're using to accomplish that. One is in the agreements with the downtown property owners and landlords where the stations are connected right into the building. Part of the agreement with those companies is on the wayfinding through their property. So places like Place de Ville, Sun Life, that's all arranged. Okay. Second, for those stations, for those stations that connect to other major property owners, Rideau Centre, Saint Laurent Centre, University of Ottawa as examples, we have been working with them on revising their own wayfinding so that it echoes our brand and our new station names. So for instance, the University of Ottawa had, because the University of Ottawa, people who work and attend there, so many of them use transit, they have very extensive wayfinding within their system which referred to how to get to Campus Station on the transit way. They're now revising that on how to get to U Ottawa Station on the O train. And the third thing that we're doing is we're installing wayfinding signs all over the city where there are stations nearby on public property to direct people, this is the way to go to get to your O train station. So that'll be, people will see things like an O with an arrow, or an O with a train icon and an arrow. So those things, and those are all rolling out over the next short period of time.
Several years ago, we were having discussions about washrooms in stations. We settled on 3 or 4 at the main bookends or the main transfer points. And during that discussion, staff indicated that pushing back on some of the washrooms, we'll just have signage in our stations directing people to off-site private washrooms like at a Tim Hortons or a McDonald's. So at stations where we do not have washrooms, will there be any type of signage or indication where people can go where people can go if they need a washroom, for example.
Mr. Chair, we followed the direction of Council and concentrated our efforts on the public washrooms that are inside the stations.
So that
we can do, I remember that discussion, Councillor, and we will take that away and look at that. I think there's some advantages to doing that, but as Pat said, that's our focus has been on the expanded washroom network, and it expands even more with Stage 2. But I do recall that discussion, and that may be a piece that we may want to add to this with our partners.
In Toronto, for example, if I look up a particular station and I get a one-pager online, it will tell me what the key tourist attractions or destinations are within that vicinity. If I click on one of our stations, will I know Lyon Station is close to the Supreme Court or Spark Street access? Will we have that same type of information available?
Yes, we will. I mentioned that we're preparing sign maps that will be posted at all station exits to show what is nearby, and those maps will also be available on octransport.com.
Are the automatic fare boxes completely protected from the elements? Are people who need to buy tickets going to be able to use them? They won't be covered in freezing rain or snow or any of that?
So there's two elements. The fare vending machines are 100% weather. You can use them in any type of weather conditions. The fare gates are either inside covered areas, or we did enhancements, everything from blowers to screening to extra glass protection, everything to ensure that they're weather protected. And the agreement we have with our fare vending equipment suppliers is 100% operability all the time. So it's a very unique agreement in North America.
Is the operating times of Line 1 equal to the operating times of Line 2?
Mr. Chair, Line 2 has shorter operating hours. It starts a little later in the morning. It finishes a little earlier at night, and that's it's still on its long-standing schedule. There was one extension made was that 2 or 3 years ago when the service was expanded to every 12 minutes. At that point, the 6:30 in the morning start was advanced to be a 6 in the morning start.
So why would we not synchronize the start and end times? I'm not as interested in the frequency of service. I would expect that Line 1 would have greater frequency, but I think we may run into problems if someone's coming from a Line 1 and wanting to transfer to Line 2, and if Line 2 is not open yet, how they're going to get southbound, and I think that may cause some confusion. So is there possibility of synchronizing the operating times?
Councillor, yes, there is, and we did give thought to that. It's a cost issue, and the way we positioned it is, remember when I tabled the budget, it's transition year, so we want to get through the launch. Then we want to come back with whatever adjustments we need to do post-launch through the budget process. If we need to synchronize those lines, that's the time to do it. So you're correct. When can we do it, and what's the costing on that is what we have to come back to you with, and we will.
The biggest concern I have right now is in the unlikely event that the service stops for whatever reason, and the ability to not just get people off the trains, but that replacement service and the speed at which we can commence replacement service, because you're going to have people basically at every LRT station requiring bus service. So can I get maybe a written reply in detail about how that will unfold? How are you going to get buses on the road? How are you going to get drivers, dozens of drivers ready, buses ready? Are we going to have enough buses to serve that line should service go down, power failure, or some other reason? And again, just finding, you were talking about the locations of R1 stops that parallel the line. How are people going to know where to go? You showed the sign that, the LCD sign that says, service not available, R1 service now being provided, but where does the customer have to go at each station? So I don't expect that answer now, but that's one of the greatest concerns I have, is in the unlikely event that service stops, how are we going to provide replacement service?
Can I just comment on that again? Because, for the public and the media. So, Councillor, you're absolutely spot on in asking that question. We will provide you a very detailed response to every member of the Commission. But you told me to speak my mind, so I'll be blunt. If there is a major service disruption, things will be very, very challenging, and I don't want anybody to leave the room with the impression that we will replicate the service, it was on the slide, I believe, of the rail, because the bus replacement service, to exactly your point, we do not have 100, 200 buses sitting around waiting for backup. So like Toronto, like Montreal, like all those comparators, when the rail service goes down, your number one protocol is communicate, over-communicate, announcements, flood the station with resources so that you can help them get to those things. There will be limited replacement bus service. People will Uber, Lyft, walk, jog, bike, complain, all those things. It won't. If it's a major service disruption, it will not be a pretty picture, just like if Albert and Slater shuts down right now, and it has. However, there's a bunch of redundancies built into the system, so I know everybody's concerned about power. One of those tests, and that's why testing and commissioning takes time, we do intentionally disengage one of the transformer stations and run the system under stress with one of those systems down. So there's workarounds. There's workarounds like Mr. Charter talked about if there's an obstruction on the line. In the unfortunate incident of a suicide, and unfortunately we will have one of those, especially the first one, there'll be major delays. So I don't want people to leave the room thinking that we'll have these bus replacement service. No industry, no transit authority in North America has that capacity. But it's how degraded does the service get? And then we also have the crossover tracks where we can run reduced frequency service. So to Troy's point, before we pull out that full bus replacement service, we will try to reduce the service and keep train service running as much as possible.
I'm more interested in the plan than making sure every single person who's standing on the corner can get home in 12 minutes. I want to see the plan in detail.
Absolutely. We'll provide you a written response.
I have many more questions, but I'm going to yield the floor to others at this time.
Thank you. Councillor Cloutier, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, and thank you very much, Mr. Charter, Mr. Scrimger, Mr. Manconi, Ms. McEwen for the presentation. It was very insightful. On slides 3, 10, and 14, I believe you referred to some of the visuals that our customers will be able to look forward to with respect to the service. And I presume that is based on GPS data. That will be based on GPS data. Am I incorrect in saying that all GPS apps that we have on our phone, that we might have on our phone, are third-party apps?
Excuse me, Mr. Chair. The bus location information comes from GPS. The train location information comes from the control system. The apps that people have on their phone, there is an OC Transpo app available for the iPhone, which we prepare, we support. There are also, through the open data that we publish, there are many other iPhone, Android, and web apps that independent developers have used, where they pick up our open data feed and present it in a way that they choose to their users.
So the train information for both the Confederation line and the Trillium line will be based on real live data coming from the control center. When I will see a sign that the next downtown-bound train from Herdman is coming in 2 minutes, that is real data.
That's right. On the station platforms on Line 1, that's real data coming out of the control system. That feature comes to Line 2 with the Stage 2 enhancement and expansion of Line 2.
Will there be, and I understand that there's an OC Transpo app for the Apple platform. Many of us are not on the Apple platform. Will there be an OC Transpo app for the Android or other platforms?
Mr. Chair, we are working in that direction. We don't yet have timing for doing that.
Okay. And I'm just making the comment because there has been some issues with the reliability of some of those third-party apps with respect to using the open data that's provided by OC Transpo, and for us who rely on knowing when the next 86 is coming to get home, it has sometimes been unreliable. And so I would like to ensure that, you know, in the 10 items you had on one of the slides of what our customers' wants and needs are, I think one of the main ones is when things are not as they should be, when will the bus be coming? I understand because of a snowstorm or a disruption or something, it's not on time, but when will it come? And they will rely on that data, on that information to make their decision to start walking, to try another bus, to call a person to pick them up. Just that point with respect to the importance of the GPS information. And interesting, on line slide 4, you referred to the best practices. No European cities there, all North American cities. Can you just tell me why or what
actually, they were there. I mean, the list is much longer than this.
Okay.
Including my personal vacation visits, and my staff got tired of all my slides of Paris and Italy and Barcelona and so forth. But trust me, I mean, New York City's not on there, but we have New York City folks on our team. It is a very exhaustive list, and we expanded it. And I know Mr. Scrimger's a big train person. His travels, he's been around the world on trains. We continually, it was really quite good in that staff were bringing their perspectives.
So European cities, Asian cities, the best practices from all the cities in the world we've consulted with, we've looked at. Thank you very much for that reassurance. I was surprised, just as information on slide 5, Mr. Scrimger, I think, said only 10 of the 13 stations have bus connectivity, and I had never thought of that. I can think of U of O that has no buses that go there. What are the other two?
The other two, Mr. Chair, are Tremblay Station at the Via train station and Searville Station.
Tremblay has the 61 and the 62?
It has the 61 and 62 as a temporary service since the closure of the transitway, which will end when train line 1 opens.
The Lyon, you said that the major STO transfer point would be Lyon Station, right downtown. What will that do to congestion? What will that do to, what do we expect that traffic to be?
Mr. Chair, that's designed to minimize congestion, to keep the STO buses running into downtown. They come across the Portage Bridge. They go to the nearest station they can. We've reconfigured the streets downtown so that they flow very nicely, and it keeps the largest flow of STO buses out of the auto traffic congested points, like the intersection of Wellington and Bank, one of the most congested intersections, or the intersection of Sussex and Rideau, also a very busy point for cars that delays transit customers, so we can keep the transit customers away from that auto traffic congestion.
I had heard on a slide earlier, on a presentation earlier, that you're expecting 90% of the OC Transpo buses to be eliminated from downtown. Is that still 90%?
It's certainly in that area. I think we're going from something like 3,000 buses a day down to something counted in hundreds.
Okay.
It's a major, major reduction.
So downtown we'll have STO buses till we get the Prince of Wales Bridge, but okay.
Actually, Chair, if I could just add to that, two things. Again, Mr. Scrimger and the team don't brag about the extensive work they've done, but to your point, because I want clarity on some key messaging today, they have done amazing work on modeling that Lyon transfer point. And there are major road modifications underway, which Councillor McKenney has supported. We've integrated all the modes and everything else into that. And like other transfer stations, STO will be doing probably a middle-of-the-night stress test when we get closer to that integration testing with them. Fare gates and flow, passenger flow, it's all been modeled through the stations and so forth. And just a reminder, last term of council, Transit Commission, the Mayor's Office, and the Chair, we worked extensively with STO to do a major reduction of STO buses going through the core, with Lyon being the transfer point, and then some routes extending all the way through to U of Ottawa and Rideau and so forth. So that's all been modeled out to address exactly your question in terms of that. So Pat, his team, Mr. Charter have done an amazing amount of work in that regard, along with our STO partners who've been great on this.
Thank you. And yes, thank you for saying that, Mr. Manconi, and I know all the work that's gone on. I know we have upcoming a stress test at Tunney's Pasture coming, and the testing that has gone on at the Belfast yards. Noted, understood. Thank you. You answered that question. Will there be safety personnel, OC Transport constables or special constables at the stations on a permanent basis, on a daily basis, on a continual basis?
Yes, Mr. Chair, we will have dedicated special constables on the line at all times.
On Lyon?
Throughout the rail network, on the LRT line. Yes, so we have our walk and ride, bike and ride officers, and they would be out there visible, and they would be riding the trains in stations and interacting with customers. Yes.
Okay. And just my last one, are there defibrillators at the stations? Are we planning on defibrillators?
Yeah, there are defibrillators at all underground stations and at the major transfer locations. Some are publicly accessible, some are staff accessible at staff stations.
At staffed stations.
Yeah.
Thank you again for the presentation. I appreciate it very much.
Councillor Kavanagh.
Thank you. Councillor
Kavanagh, and then
pardon, I heard my name.
And then Commissioner Olson.
Sorry, thought you were looking right at me.
Thank you very much. I feel like I just came back from a busman's holiday because I was in London, UK, riding on the tube, and there's 270 tube stations in about half the size of Ottawa. Of course, it's 8 million people, and it's fascinating, all the crisscrossing, and it's incredibly complicated, but you eventually figure it out. So watching this presentation today with just 13, pardon me if I just say just 13 stops, it seems a piece of cake compared to riding on the tubes, I'll tell you. Anyway, but you certainly appreciate it, and once you get addicted to it, you're, it's so efficient, especially being able to go to the airport in one shot, just saying. We can talk about that some other time. But anyway, so I just want to thank you for all the work you're doing, ongoing. I've raised this question before, but just in context of gender lens, I know you've said you've taken it in consideration, but one of the things that happens once you launch something is that you see changes later. And as the liaison on this issue, I'm hoping we can work together, because I suspect that we'll have feedback on things that we could even further improve, on things that we can look for that we hadn't thought of before once people start actually using it. So I just wanted to get your information now on how we can do this, on the process, because I certainly will hear from people. We'll be having a public forum on gender equity and on women's equity, so I just want to know how can we feed that information to you on concerns.
Absolutely, Councillor, any channel, and certainly once we open up, will everything be perfect? Of course not. I can tell you that our lead station oversight person for Mostly Transit was Colleen Connolly, and she is a very great planner. She worked in Calgary before, and she's CEPTED certified or has extensive training in that regard. And I can remember her walking me through the stations in terms of safety, where there's literally no dark corner and so forth. But absolutely any councillor can give us feedback once we open in terms of making things even better. But I know I'm very confident that from a safety, security, and equity and all that, I think you'll be very impressed with what you see.
Thank you. I think one of the big things that always comes up is the connectivity, talking about getting to the station. So that's part of it, not just the station itself. So hopefully we can talk about that if there's any issues that arise. Just a couple of questions. In terms of, this has been a really rough winter in terms of council offices have been inundated with concerns about lateness and problems with bus schedules. Will we see a lot of this, I don't want to say disappear completely, but I'd like to, but are we going to see a vast improvement with the opening of this line?
Absolutely, and what's going to happen is once we open, those buses that interline and have to head into downtown and get stuck in downtown traffic conditions and loop back to try to make their next run or a connected run, the majority of those will no longer have to do that. So the east, west, and south, they would predominantly stay in those geographical areas. I know that our operators can't wait for that because it gives it more reliability. Mr. Scrimgeour tried to be bold one day with me and give me a prediction about how more reliable it's going to be, and I hope he's right because it'll be a vast improvement. And that's why I keep referencing the pain and all the stuff that the customers have gone through. We know once we open, it's not just about the rail line, it's also about getting there with the buses and being more reliable in all your communities that have been challenging. And through the core, we will retain service, because I think that was a myth that was out there. We're going to pull all the bus service out of the core. There is still some service in there, including after hours. So we predict reliability will increase dramatically in all areas of the city.
One of the points was raised earlier by Mr. Hache was about getting people from areas like social housing areas that aren't directly near the lines to the stations a little faster. I live near social housing. I know that some of those bus routes tend to be the milk runs, and it sort of discourages those people from, they're not getting the connectivity as other neighborhoods. And I'm wondering if we can work together on specific concerns about those kinds of situations.
The answer is yes, and not only now, but you have 4 times a year that you can work with Mr. Scrimgeour directly. And what I encourage customers to do is, just like Councillor Brockington, he raised a challenge to us. We worked with him in his office, and we're fixing some things in there. So you have 4 times a year that we make adjustments. So if there's issues, Mr. Scrimgeour and his team will work with you.
Thank you. One more question. In terms of where you're buying your tickets and for the Presto passes, it tends, it's obviously all at Loblaws and Shoppers Drug Mart, and so clearly that leaves out mom and pop shops, because I remember being able to go to a corner store and pick up tickets in the old days, and so I feel for those stores that can no longer do that. What is the advantage we're getting to have this monopoly?
Mr. Chair, the arrangement with Loblaw Corporation and their brand names, Loblaw Shoppers Drug Mart and Royal Canadian Superstore, followed a public procurement process that was conducted by Metrolinx for service in all the parts of Ontario that are served by the Presto card. In return for the exclusivity that Metrolinx gave them, they are giving a lot of profile in their stores to the Presto card and the service that's available. We entered into an agreement with Metrolinx for Metrolinx to be able to do that in Ottawa, and we retained a lot of non-competitive ability to put fare services out at other locations. So we will have fare services available at all of our O train stations. We will be adding ticket machines to a number of transitway stations. We have retained the ability to make arrangements with local merchants to sell fare products that are other than the Presto card. And we are working on just how to do that within our complete fare system beyond just what Presto does.
Thank you. I'd be interested to get more information on that when you have it, because I think that it must hurt our small businesses, and I just wanted to make sure that we're not forgetting them, because they're the engine of our economy here. So thank you. My last question is about the number 11. Of course, I'm very happy that it's going to return to go to Bayshore, and people are extremely anxious. If we have any further delays, and we pray to God no, is there any chance that we can get that route up and running? People have had a pretty tough winter in Bay Ward. The residents who rely on that service have suffered quite a bit in not being able to get that service to Bayshore. So I just want to know, is that possible?
No, Councillor, unfortunately, we don't think it's possible, but we're not focusing on that right now. We're focusing on launching the rail line, and I can assure you, Mr. Scrimger and the team, we have a calendar on possible scenarios and how that rolls out. And the bus routes need to roll out after the LRT piece, and we're as anxious as you are to roll those out.
Thank you.
Councillor Gower.
Thank you. Councillor Cloutier touched on it. Earlier this week, councillors received a note that there's going to be another test of the transfer point at Tunney's Station, and I was hoping you could just give us an overview of how that's being simulated, what you're looking for, and some of your experience from previous transfer point testing. I think Herdman was one that's already been done. So if you could just give an overview of what that involves and what you're looking for.
Yes, Mr. Chair, that's coming up on Sunday, the 31st of March, where we're diverting, so the effect on our customers is we're diverting them around Dominion Westboro and Tunney's Pasture stations for a few hours on that Sunday, while we do some intensive simulation at Tunney's Pasture Station. As Mr. Manconi mentioned earlier, all the operations at Tunney's Pasture, well, first of all, the station has been designed for the intensity of operation that we'll have, and then even after that, we did computer simulation modeling, very detailed, of how the buses would move and making sure that all the turns are right, and looking at the volumes and how long it's going to take for customers to get on and off the buses. And then what we will be doing on that day is simulating that exact operation with real buses. So we'll have a couple hundred staff working out there that day. We'll have about 80 buses. They will be coming in as though they were unscheduled. We'll be testing stress testing the weak points. But what we'll be doing on that day is going through 5 tests, and not necessarily in this exact order. We'll be testing normal morning rush hour operations if there's a broken down bus in the station, normal afternoon operations if there's a broken down bus at one of the platforms in the station, and how the operation flows if the station has to be closed completely, if there's some very large obstacle. So we'll do a number of tests of each of those tests, and this will take us through the day. I think each one of those goes for about an hour, and then there's the setup and knockdown time that adds up to the full hours of closure. We did this earlier at Herdman Station. Of course, we coat the station with cameras, so we record everything. We've got, not in addition to the drivers and monitors, we got note takers, we got stopwatches, we got cameras. It's all recorded and analyzed. Herdman did very, very well. You try to break the station operations, and you can see how the on-street staff and supervisors can modify to get around that obstacle. So we'll be doing the same at Tunney's Pasture, and then following Tunney's, we'll be doing Blair as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gower. Commissioner Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Manconi, thank you and your team for your presentation. It was very informative, very insightful. Thank you. I have a couple of questions. One, during his part of the presentation, Mr. Scrimger mentioned that during the off-peak hours, trains would arrive at stations frequently throughout the day. Didn't specify what that meant. What I know, I live out in Canada, and I do take transit to Transit Commission meetings and home as well. So today, for example, when I leave, I will go to a bus stop. I'll be able to see on a sign that says the next 61 is coming in half an hour, because, frankly, the off-peak transit service to Canada is not frequent. So I can find out what that is. I can say, okay, I've got half an hour to wait. I can go to this store. I can go to the library or whatever. After the train arrives, I'll catch a train. I'll get out to Tunney's pasture. I'll see then that the next bus is coming in half an hour. It's a different story, if I can put it that way, being stuck at Tunney's pasture, no disrespect to Tunney's pasture, than it is being stuck downtown. Is there going to be a way to know downtown that my next 61 leaving Tunney's will be, don't catch this train, catch 2 trains from now, that'll be better for you? Or will I have to be going onto a phone and planning my route and doing something like that?
Mr. Vice Chair, the best way to do that will be to use an app on the phone, or for a lot of people, they will over time come to learn the schedule. They will know what time their trips leave from Tunney's. Everyone will make their own decision, but they'll be able to know that if they're downtown and there's a train coming every 5 minutes and it's going to take them 10 minutes to get to where they're transferring, give themselves about 20 minutes. So, okay, I'll give it a bit of a wait here before I go. The best information is going to be through the OC Transpo app on the phone or any of the other online apps.
Okay. Are there any near-term plans to increase the off-peak frequency of the 61?
The 61 itself will be running at most times every 15 minutes as now. I think there are some, if you're going, the larger gaps are if you're going beyond Terry Fox Station, you're going down Castle Frank. The 62 has larger gaps than the 61. But it really depends on each person's destination, what's the best way of getting there. For the most part, the schedules on those Canada-Stittsville routes, the main rapid routes like 61, 62, 63, for the most part, they will be similar to today. And if there's any future expansion, that's an option that we could bring for consideration in future years' budgets.
Okay, and one other question. You identified, and I really appreciate the emphasis being on the customers today, because ultimately that's where it is most important. You've identified a lot of measures that you are taking to ensure a smooth transition, but obviously there are risks to a successful transition. Can you share any of those, or can you report on those, on what they are to us, or what mitigation measures have you taken to offset those risks?
That's a very good question. I think there's a range of risks. There's the sort of tactical ones that are minor in nature that you just address with normal operations adjustments. I think the 2 biggest risks, let me step back. There's a massive risk log that we've done right from day one, from design, that you push through the whole rail system and so forth. But the customer-facing risks, the top 2 that we identified, I'll say 3. First off, the original design of these stations was there were going to be no personnel there. There were going to be unmanned stations, and we've changed that. We will have customer service reps, some of them throughout the lines. And on launch, specific to launch, as Pat said, we're going to have hundreds of staff there. We're recruiting volunteers from across the organization, and we're training them how to be customer service reps and so forth. So that mitigates the risk of the customer that, for some reason, didn't take in any of what we've produced today between now and launch, and they arrive at Tunney's Pasture or Blair or any station, and they're just lost. We'll look for the red vest, we'll take you through, and we'll help you out. I think that's risk number 1. Risk number 2 that came through the focus group was I totally understand my commute inbound, where I take my bus, end at a station, go down, peak. I don't have to worry about the schedule. The train will arrive. What about my trip home? Will my bus be waiting for me there? And I give full credit to our customers. We hadn't thought of some of those risks, and Mr. Charter has retooled his operation to mitigate those risks. Signage, extra buses there for snowy days, supervisors during peaks, and so forth. And then the last one is I think the most strategic, which is the parallel bus service, which is a very, very expensive investment, but it's your insurance policy. In the event that during those first 3 weeks we have a major breakdown of the system, or a train gets stuck, or, heaven forbid, there's something negative that occurs, we have the parallel bus system in operation. We don't want customers on the buses. We want them to bleed onto the train station. But as Mr. Scrimger said, there's 2/3 of them, are getting a change on day one. But having that parallel service for 3 weeks, and yes, we will get criticized. You will get criticized for empty buses if everything's working very well. But to be again direct, that's your insurance policy in the event of those first 3 weeks. And other agencies that have launched, 2 things. Nobody's got the load you have on day one. It's not a green field where you want the ridership to build. We're moving 10,700 passengers per hour per direction from bus to rail in one move. There's no second chance to do that right. And secondly is if there is an incident, you have for at least 3 weeks some coverage there. But we'll get criticized if things are working really well, that we're spending money for having parallel bus service. It's an insurance policy. And the city manager, I want to thank him. He supported me in that initiative, and that came from some of the best practices reviews.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. Councillor Sudds.
Thank you. Thank you for the very detailed presentation. It's great to see how this is all going to unfold. A few questions for you. One, just to make sure I understand. On one of the slides, there was the fact that children under 5 would be carried through the fare gate, or a parent can get a free print ticket, I believe I understood. Can you explain to me how that happens? And I'm thinking particularly a few scenarios. One in which the parent has a Presto card, but they're taking their children along. So how will that work? The second of which, just to address strollers.
Yes, happy to answer that, Mr. Chair. There's different experiences depending on how the trip starts. If the trip starts on a bus, then it's all done by interaction with the bus operator, and the bus operator will print enough fare receipts, transfers for as the parent or the adult with the kid's needs. If they're starting at a station, first of all, if they're pushing a stroller, if they're carrying their kid on their shoulder, anything like that, single fare, walk through the fare gate. The fare gates aren't going to snap closed while half of that process is through it. There's light beams that measure the progress through, and if someone's towing luggage, pushing a stroller, they are one person as they one fare-paying person as they board. If the kids are a little older, not quite 5, not quite 6, to the point where they need to pay their own fare, but they're a little older and they're walking on their own, then the customer can, if they're going to the ticket machine to buy a single ride fare, they can ask for another receipt to be printed that they can scan for their child. If they are a frequent traveler with an older child who isn't yet 6, who walks independently, that's the point where they should get in touch with us and get the special child smart card.
Okay, terrific. Just want to make sure I understand those are important logistics. Another consideration around the operating times of the line. I'm sure a tremendous amount of work went into this. My question being around considering the closing time of, for example, with say bars or restaurants in the market area, and consideration for that outflow that could potentially be looking for a ride.
I'm going to let Pat comment, but first I want to give you some insight into how hours get established. We have, and this isn't a brag, it's just the fundamentals of rail operations. You need to have a maintenance window they've got to go out and check the tracks. So we have the shortest window possible. We squeeze the P3 proponents to saying we want to maximize the customer service hours because we do have those bar hours and so forth. So that's how we got to that 2 a.m. piece. What Pat has done, and this is what I wanted to comment on the bus route piece, is because we did model out a scenario. It was one of my questions. What happens when all the bars close downtown? How are they getting home and so forth? So over to Pat on that one there.
Thanks, John. One of the things that's important to know about early morning versus late night service is when you do know that we have to have the maintenance window, and our maintenance window, as John says, is quite short at 4 hours. 4 hours from when the customers can last use a train to when they can first use a train. Then you narrow that further to how long it takes to get the trains off the track and how long it takes to get them on in the morning. So the maintenance workers really have about 2.5 hours to do any critical work they have to do that night. But one of the things that we consistently find, and we check before we do it, is that early morning ridership is many, many times higher than late night ridership. Late night ridership is concentrated on people who are going home late from bars and entertainment events and the people who work and support that. Early morning ridership is many times higher with people who are going to work early, people who are going to set up places that people go to work, people who do janitorial work at hospitals, people who come in and start up downtown parking garages, downtown office buildings, the people who get here and make it ready for us to come in at a later time in the morning. So it's the hour between 5 and 6 in the morning, we'll have many more transit customers on board these trains than the hour between 1 and 2 at night. We knew that cutting the service off at 2 at night isn't quite as late as it needs to be to catch everyone who's going home. And on those nights, on Friday and Saturday nights, we will have all the bus capacity we need on the overnight bus routes. The overnight bus routes will run, every few minutes as required to move people out right as the bars and restaurants close, and then as you get closer to 3:30 or so, we tail off and have a less frequent but still consistent overnight service until the service starts up in the morning. And that's continuously adjustable. When we find that there's more people traveling by transit on their way home from the Byward Market, we will make arrangements to schedule more trips on all of those bus routes.
Okay, fantastic. Question around... am I correct in assuming that the new LRT arrival times, that data will be available through OC Transpo's current app, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And will the data from that be made available through the Open Data Portal?
Yes, it will.
Okay. I think perhaps lastly around that, we've talked a lot about safety and security of the system. I do recall perhaps just over a year ago a cyber breach Metrolinx in Toronto. So flagging the cyber aspect of the system to ensure that we're on top of that as well.
Councillor, is that in relation to the fare system or the train control systems?
Both.
Both. So a couple of things. On our fare system, the gates and the ticket machine were very different than what you see down in Toronto. We have bought our own equipment and so forth, and we have a 10-year maintenance agreement with an external provider. There's a bunch of redundancies built on this end and on the Metrolinx interface piece. On the train control systems and so forth, there are many things associated with what you're talking about, and I will not go into a public discussion, obviously, about that, because rail safety has come a long way since the bombings in Spain and England and so forth. And so there's a lot of features. You recall you were at the tour at the TOCC. You have to sign a waiver to even be in there. You always have to be escorted. That's for some of those reasons that you're talking about, no photos and so forth. So yes, the short answer is there's a lot of layers of security that we've done, and the RTG and RTM have in place.
Okay, amazing. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Caracata.
Thanks, Chair. I just have a couple detailed questions about the trains themselves. How many seats are going to be on the train? I know you mentioned 600 passengers, but how many, physical seats?
Mr. Chair, each of the two cars has 120 seats, so 240 seats per two-car train, and the remaining 360 people standing at a fairly comfortable standing space on trains that are very, very, very busy, following a short delay or following Canada Day or Blues Fest. The trains can accommodate more people squeezed more tightly. The 600 per train is the number we use to plan the frequency of service and plan the capacity.
And then how many bikes do you think can fit on one of the trains and strollers?
So there's the cooperative seating areas. There's one beside each doorway. 7 doorways per car, 14 per train. There's 4 cooperative seating, multi-purpose areas per car, so 8 per train. We'll be directing cyclists to the first one. It's likely that 2 or 3 bicycles can be stood and held comfortably in those areas without blocking too many other people. And then that leaves the remaining 7 per train, 7 of these cooperative seating areas where there's designated standing space for people who are bringing strollers, luggage, people using wheelchairs or other devices. So there's a lot of space, and it's only cyclists that we're directing to the first door of the first car. That leaves the other 7 that will almost always be open for someone else who needs them.
Okay, great. And you talk a lot about the customers here in Ottawa, but I'm wondering if there's any promotion for tourists who come to Ottawa who might ride the train, and whether that's being promoted in some way.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Our team is working with Via Rail to do an integrated booking online. So if you're buying a train ticket, you can buy your ticket online, integrating there. I know that the Airport Authority, we've put in a vending machine at the airport, even in advance of Stage 2. Getting to the airliners directly is a little bit harder, but there's a lot of integration discussions going on with the Airport Authority in that regard on Stage 2.
Okay, excellent. And lastly, any plans to encourage people to ride the new trains, or maybe, I don't know if you've discussed sort of fares being waived for the first day or for the first week as a way to sort of celebrate or encourage people to ride it, and I don't know if you've had those chats, but...
No, it's an excellent question. We've had extensive dialogue on that. I know the chair and the mayor were asking me about that. We will not be doing a free day. Those don't go over well, particularly with the volume that we're anticipating, because it has a tendency to draw out a lot of customers, and then you'll get negative reviews if the trains are overpacked and so forth. Remembering that a lot of our customers have monthly passes, so we're going to be encouraging them to ride, once we do our opening, to immediately ride the rail system and so forth. And there's pros and cons to those free things. The other thing is you have frozen fares for till July 1st to give some relief in that regard. So we considered it. There's some negative risks to that, and that it can affect that first impression. So we do have other free days. Canada Day is free all day. It used to be limited to the nighttime, so forth. We have New Year's Eve after 8 o'clock. Going to continue to do those things, and we've integrated fares with the major festivals too. So.
Great, thank you.
Councillor McKenney.
July 1st might be the first day.
I'm not commenting on the date. You know I won't.
You might get what you want. Right. Just a few very specific questions, because most of what I've been concerned about or thinking about in terms of our different communities and how they're their service have been answered already. But I was visited by a few members from CNIB and another woman who lives in my ward who is visually impaired, and about several issues, and not all to do with rail. But one of the things that came up a couple of times was people who have visual impairment and their unique requirements day one, week one, as they're navigating the stations. Have we, in your stakeholder consultations, have you reached out specifically to the blind community to ensure that they're walked through that and that they understand exactly what happens when they show up to the stations?
Yes, we've done a couple things on our journey mapping. We had various scenarios and input from a cross-section of customers. We also, during the design of major elements of the LRT, we had our accessibility advisory group, which was fantastic. They actually drove some of the design changes on how the doors and the posts and the grab bars are configured and so forth. And then also we, in some of the outreach to seniors' homes and so forth. But again, back to the risks. The reason we're going to flood the stations with people with old vests is for exactly that. And Mr. Pepper and Mr. Scrimger are going to be training people on, if you see someone struggling from an accessibility perspective, irrespective of what their disability is, go reach out and proactively help them out and so forth, and do exactly what you're talking about. We have a ton of features that weren't even contemplated in the original design for exactly that reason. But we want to put the icing on the cake and have that customer interface there to help anybody.
Okay. On the bike racks at the different stations, as I go by many of them often for different reasons, mostly on this side of the canal and going west. And some of them have a lot of bike racks, and some of them, I'm thinking of the Carling station in particular, only has a small handful. Is that how can we make sure that there's enough bike racks, for people? There's nothing more frustrating when you're cycling and you have nowhere to lock up your bike.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So for existing stations like Carling on Line 2, we monitor regularly how many spaces of the bike parking are being used, and we'll be doing the same with Line 1. Line 1 has many more bike parking spaces as we open than others do. And at the same point, we're also adding bike parking capacity all across the system. We're still wrapping up the project that was funded by one of the federal PTIF funds. But we monitor regularly how many spaces are being used, and when we find that there are few spaces available, or when we ever see indications that there's more bicycles being parked there than there's room for, that's when we start working on what's an affordable way to add parking capacity at that station. Carling in particular has very limited land availability. Most of the land there is not in city hands, and sometimes that takes longer to do. So we're monitoring it all the time. We have people go and see how many bikes are parked there. We're also taking comments from customers, and if you ever see any example at a particular station, snap us a picture, tell us where you took it, when you took it, and that goes in as part of our monitoring system.
Okay. Fair enough, but I just want to go back to use Carling as an example. There are only 5 or 6 spots to lock up. So when stage 1 opens, I would imagine that that line is going to be used at a much greater frequency. So almost immediately we're going to need. So I could send you a picture today if that helps. But I think that I just think that we need to make sure that, as we're launching, we know that there will be certain areas where we are going to have more people cycling in to take the Trillium line to get onto the Confed line.
Short answer is yes, Councillor. I mean, that's why we have the special constables out there doing other stuff too. And if there's a bike parking issue at Carling, or you feel the need that we need to add another ring or two there, it's not a big deal, and absolutely we'll do it.
Okay. And just one last question that I've thought about, and actually residents have talked to me about, is the elevators in the station. So the stations themselves are not heated, and how do you see the elevators working in the cold, and as like salt and grit gets kind of traipsed into the station on people's boots, and then into the elevators, not the elevator, but the escalator systems that are in the stations.
So elevators. Probably the most expensive in the industry right now. They're very robust, heavy duty. We did not skimp on those on stage 1 or stage 2. Double, so if one goes down, you have the other one there. Maintenance regimes, RTM, we've walked through all their maintenance regimes, and this applies to elevators and escalators. They have special, they look like Ghostbuster vacuum cleaners. They're there to grab the grit, because that's your problem on escalators. And we have redundancies there also on some of those features. And so heavy-duty maintenance regime in the winter, lots of proactive maintenance. Remember, if an elevator goes down, they get penalized, so we deduct from that $4 million payment. So they're highly incentivized to have all those systems up and running. And your hot buttons are escalators, elevators. If they go down, we start deducting immediately within a response time and so forth. So it's in their best interest. We've seen the equipment they've purchased. They've done a best practice review too there. So it's
okay. Good to know. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Wright Gilbert, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll keep this short because I am mindful of the time. I actually just have a comment, is that I wanted to thank Mr. Manconi and his staff for the really detailed presentation. I am actually one of your customers. I travel every single day to and from work from Orleans to Tiny's Pasture. Currently I'm a 91. And so, I had some anxiety about what my customer experience was going to be like on day one, and I do plan on switching over on day one, so you can just count me in. And I had some anxiety about, okay, I take the bus to Blair, and then what? And so this presentation was incredibly helpful to assuage my concerns about my customer experience, taking the bus to Blair Station and then riding the line 1 from beginning to end to Tunney's Pasture, especially given that both Blair Station and Tunney's Pasture are transfer points, and they're going to be very busy. So I just, as a customer, I would like to thank you for the work that you have done to make sure that the customer experience is there. And I can say from experience that when the Tunney's Pasture station switched over from the transitway to the surface level, I guess we'll call it, station, that the OC Transport folks were there, and they were incredibly helpful. And when I'm confused, I get a really confused look on my face. Fun fact. And so they were able to pick up on that and ask me if I needed help, which I did. So I just want to thank you very much, and I am very excited to try the new trains. Thank you.
Thank you. That would have been an excellent way to wrap up, but we have one more question from Councillor Tierney.
It's a single question. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just, first of all, I did want to point out a gold star to you and your staff. Yeah, it was dicey a few weeks ago. The service wasn't quite there. I'm definitely receiving a lot more positive feedback this week and last week than I did 3 weeks ago. I heard a question from Councillor McKenney. I just want to highlight that again. So currently in our current world with the elevator system, if one goes down, it can be down for weeks sometimes, and I've experienced that myself. What's the restriction on RTG, like now that they have Blair Station, now it's going to be theirs? What's the time frame that they have to repair those elevators, where typically it could have been 2 or 3 weeks, let's be honest with ourselves, because of parts, whatever may have to happen with those elevators? What would we look at now, knowing that there's a restriction?
There's a defined response time for all elements. I don't have that here with me, but it's very quick. But again, they're incentivized. So if the elevator is down, there's deductions after a certain amount of time on their payment. But to your point of, you mentioned the word parts, as part of the ramp up in operational readiness, and I'm just throwing this in so everybody knows the complexity of testing and commissioning, as Mr. Charter sits with RTM and they're going through line by line their parts inventory on hand of critical components based on infrastructure, what goes down typically in the first month of operation, 6 months of it, and what do they have on hand. So we have line of sight into their inventory, what's on stock. They are new elevators, so they're readily available parts, but so incentivized, response times, penalties if they don't achieve it, redundancy, and then we have line of sight on RTM. We can audit anything, any element of their operation. If we're not satisfied, we can take
and that's a huge win for the accessibility community for sure, so thank you for that.
Thank you. Okay, everybody, can we receive that item? Thank you very much for the presentation and answering all the questions. Received? Thank you. Next item, fair strategies to increase transit ridership consistent with the city's transportation master plan. We have two delegations, and then we'll go to questions with that one. So, Mr. Cullen, you're here. Come on up. Sorry, Jim, we got to bump you here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, members of the Commission. I'm here representing the Federation of Citizens Associations. My name is Alex Cullen. I'm Vice President of the FCA. And we've been here before you with respect to this issue, and we are supporting the motion that is being presented before you today. The FCA does support the City Council's Transportation Master Plan objective of increasing transit ridership and the public investment that has been given into expanding public transit as a means of achieving that goal. Clearly, investing now LRT1 and LRT2 upwards of close to $7 billion is a massive investment, and we want to make sure it succeeds. Our issue is the policies to support transit ridership, in particular given the history of the past almost 8 years. We are concerned that we have in our Transportation Master Plan the target of increasing transit ridership as a share of transportation trips from 22% in 2011 to 26% in 2031. As those of you who have followed Statistics Canada documentation, you will realize that the latest results were at 20% of transit ridership as a modal share. So in other words, we've not progressed, we've gone backwards. Part of the mandate of the Transit Commission is to adopt policies in support of increasing ridership. It makes good sense for the City of Ottawa, both in terms of the bottom line, in terms of tax dollars, because the alternative is that much more expensive to provide and maintain roads, and also in terms of quality of life and the environment. So what we're here to ask for, and you may want to fold it into your Transportation Master Plan review, but what we're here to ask for is, obviously, there is an assumption that transit users must contribute towards the cost of the transit system. That's fine. But there's also a point at which price affects behavior. Clearly, service affects behavior, accessibility affects behavior, and we're talking about the decision by residents whether or not to take transit. So from the FCA's point of view, if we are going to make this massive investment in transit, let's make sure that we have the appropriate fair strategies to ensure that we achieve our goal of increasing ridership. We don't have that information. We're suggesting that the Transit Commission be worth the Transit Commission's while to look at best practices, the literature, the demands on the system, because price is a factor. So we're asking the Transit Commission to engage in a study or engage the appropriate staff in a study to see what that strategy would be, that you would have enough revenue coming in to help pay for the system, but you also have the pricing points that ensures that you don't lose ridership as you have lost since 2011 till about 2016, 2017. In 2011, you were attracting 103.5 million rides. I think the current figure now is 97.8. LRT clearly is going to have an impact, and we hope so. If it doesn't have an impact, you have a white elephant on your hands. So it just makes sense to us that you would look at those fair strategies that would make sure that you achieve your goal in the Transportation Master Plan of increasing transit ridership in the city. So that's why we're in support of the motion that's before you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Cullen. Any questions for the delegation? Mr. Wilson?
Mr. Cullen, thank you very much. You did note that fares are one aspect of ridership. And also, obviously you're here, you understand that we're on the cusp of a sea change in how we provide transit services to the city. Does it not make more sense to actually wait until we see we get stability with the light rail and see where we're going then, and then undertake a study of fare strategies to increase ridership? LRT may be a roaring success. It may not be, as you say, but isn't it better to wait until we have some idea of where we've landed on it?
Well, timing is always an issue, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the point that's being made about the impact of LRT. I think a lot is hanging on the pricing for LRT. Already this council has decided to push off fare increases, in part because of the disruption of the transition. But you've already built into your affordability model for LRT a fare increase of 2.5% a year stretching out to 2031. So that's already there. Is it the appropriate level? So these studies take some time. They don't happen overnight. I think you'd be better off starting now to find out, because by the time the results come in, LRT will have opened. You will have information. You'll know what the elasticities are. Mr. Scrimger knows all about elasticities. So delaying, I don't think you're going to gain very much simply because it takes so much time to do these studies. So LRT is going to happen. I get that. Our point is, please make sure you have that strategy in place. You're not going to have that strategy in place by 2020, but you ought to have that information before you to see, are you on the right track? Do you need to move, deviate this way, deviate that way, whatever it is? And given what's happened in the past since 2011, we're concerned that we should not have lost that ridership when we had population growth and employment growth at the same time. No, it's not 100, and Mr. Chairman, Councillor Brocken makes a very good point. Our assumption is not it all happened because of fares. But it would be naive to assume that fares did not have an impact. And fares is something you guys control, right? So do the homework. And as consumers, as residents affected by your decisions, we would like to see that homework, because it's easier to sell a fare increase and or a tax increase if the information is before the public. Because I think the public, generally speaking, wants this to be a success. So this is the due diligence we're asking for. I take your point about timing, but I think the opening of the LRT and by the time you get the results of the study, I don't think are incompatible.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Cullen. Next up is Trevor Hache, and while Trevor's making his way to the seat, I want to remind members that there was another presentation scheduled this morning, another delegation, Miss Anu Bowles, and she's unable to stay with us, but a copy of her presentation is on the shared drive for you to look at. Mr. Hache?
Thank you, Chair and Transit Commissioners. I just wanted to speak in support of this motion. Of course, our fare structure should be designed to encourage transit ridership. We've been quite concerned about the annual increases and the plans to increase fares every year by 2.5% according to the long-term financial plan. If fares are to increase by 2.5% every year, the return trip on OC Transpo in the year 2048 will cost the user more than $14. And we think that's really far too much. People already are saying, if I live in Vanier and I want to travel to the Byward Market and pick up some local vegetables, I could probably drive there and park more affordably than taking the bus if my husband and I wanted to do it, for example. That's a specific anecdotal bit of information that a woman shared with me who lives in Vanier. And so I think we need to be designing the fare structure to encourage transit ridership, and I think this assumption that we're going to increase fares every year by 2.5% is not going to lead us to increasing transit ridership. I'd also like consideration or more consideration given to equity and inclusion. And so the equity and inclusion lens should be vigorously applied to the fare structure. So we were really grateful that everyone on council, come budget time, froze the Access Pass and the Community Pass and the Equipass so that people living on low incomes don't have to pay more for the rest of this year. That's really great. We're concerned about the 8-year trend, which is that transit fares have increased on average more than double what the rate of inflation was. And so we know that people that are living on social assistance or working a minimum wage job can't afford to constantly pay more because they're having to pay more for housing, they're having to pay more for food and other daily expenses. And so everything that the city can do to vigorously apply its own policies to the fare structure and this consideration would be greatly appreciated. So in Calgary, you can get a monthly bus pass for $6 a month if you make less than $12,000 a year. They have a sliding scale model for their transit fares, and we would love the City of Ottawa to consider what might be possible here that could perhaps learn from the Calgary model. And then the other thing is that right now, if you do tap your Presto card, and you want to pay as you go, I guess, which is what I do. I don't always ride the bus downtown, or I don't always work full-time hours, and so getting a monthly bus pass doesn't always make sense for me. So what I tend to do is I load it with cash and I tap. But when you get to a point in the month when you've paid a single ride fare to the point at which you've reached the cost of a monthly bus pass, we'd really like to see the city automatically upgrade someone to the monthly bus pass so that we're not nickel and diming our riders. So we understand that through the Presto and Metrolinx business model that it is possible. It might cost the city to treat the customers well in that way and stop nickel and diming them, but I think it would be a worthwhile expense. So I guess, you know, Teresa, Councillor Cabin, I didn't have a chance to ask you this in advance of today, but for the person who's moving this motion, I was just wondering if a friendly amendment could be made to essentially bring a huge focus of the report to address equity and inclusion and how the fare structure could better address these concerns, and also whether or not that automatic upgrade to a monthly pass could be considered as part of this go-forward report.
Thank you, Mr. Hache. Councillor Kavanagh.
Thank you. I guess I was asked questions in this. I think I'm supposed to ask you questions. But thank you. The reason I'm bringing this motion forward is in terms of equity. And first of all, I want to thank Council for agreeing to a freeze to the low-income passes for this year. I think that was very helpful. It wasn't a large cost, but it made a big difference to those who are affected by it. That's why I put that forward, because I truly believe that it's very, very helpful to that community, and it means more ridership, because we want to encourage people at every level to use the system. This is almost certainly going to be happening post-LRT, as it were, because I can't see us, if we're on, it's imminent, if LRT is imminently going to be put on. So, but I just want to ask you, do you see the competitions, this is what I see, as being other forms of transportation? You talked about somebody taking their car to the market, i.e. parking is cheaper, but other things are Uber and other things, and is that what you're discussing in terms of the competition, as it were?
Certainly, we know that Uber and Lyft are parasitic to transit operators. They are sucking customers off the public transit systems and into these private vehicles that drive on the roads and no doubt damage the roads and congest the roads, impacting the climate and the public transit system's ability to be reliable, because there are more cars on the road. So we do think that those business models that are being financed by people with very deep pockets. We don't know how much longer, Lyft and Uber are going to exist, but certainly we know that they're pulling people off the public transit system and they're congesting the roads, and so we need to have a public transit fare structure that encourages people and is cheaper, ideally, quite a lot cheaper than those other private options.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh, and thank you, Mr. Hache. Mr. Manconi, would you like to comment on this motion before we discuss further?
Certainly, Mr. Chair. There's a bunch of parts to this that, and some of it is historic and recent history that I think is important for members of the Commission and new members to the Commission and Council. First off, in terms of how pricing affects ridership, I agree with the first speaker, Mr. Cullen. He and I have had discussions about this. We did do a very extensive report on that, and I'm happy to recirculate that. Last term of council, we did that. And I caution everyone that elasticity is but one of the inputs. Commissioner Olson spot on in terms of what are all the drivers to ridership and so forth, but we brought in an independent expert in this area of elasticity and ridership trends, and that report talked about because our question was, why is ridership moving in downward trend? So we have that. I'm happy to circulate that to members of the Commission. Secondly, I caution anyone on talking about Uber and Lyft taking away rides from transit. There is no evidence other than New York City that is occurring. And quite frankly, in terms of multimodal operation where you're trying to create capacity on certain routes, last mile, first mile, any mode can be helpful, and quite frankly, leading edge transit agencies are moving to that and getting into vouchers for those that can't afford it and so forth. So just a caution out there. You did approve, once you receive the pricing, how it affects ridership study last term, again, back to the incremental changes, Council approved a brand new fare strategy, and it looked at eliminating multiple subsidies on top of subsidies that were no longer effective, equitable, and so forth. So that was done. You have the transit affordability plan that you've approved, and you also, I want to reiterate, we apply the equity inclusion lens onto fares, onto routes. There was a motion from a previous councillor that directed us to do that. So we've done a lot of that work, and I'm happy to bring back a fare strategy sometime, but don't ask me when. Don't ask me when the capacity is available. And if you want it in the context of the Transportation Master Plan, absolutely, as some of the councillors have mentioned, you need to let LRT do its thing, because it is going to change the travel patterns and behaviors across the board. And so I don't if you want us to do this, you want to direct us to do this, we can do it. I just want to manage your expectation. It will not be anytime soon. And I will need to look at all those inputs back into it. And if I have to, I'll bring back a report telling you what external resources I need and the capacity of what things we put on the back burner. Because it's incongruent to what you've just done, getting to where you are. It's misaligned to all the steps you've taken to set you up for the future in that regard. So not opposed to it. That's my view on it, and I want to manage expectations. I don't disagree with a lot of the comments that have been made. But again, I'm trying to tell you that we're not just sitting idly by. If you want to see that report by an external expert that we paid a lot of money for, I'm happy to send it out, and why don't you sit down with us and we'll walk you through it for those that have not seen it, before you maybe make some of these decisions that gets us off of things that are important to all of you, expanding routes, looking at reliability, performance metrics, all those things.
Would you like, Councillor Kavanagh, would you like to hold your motion so that you have a chance to look at that information, or do you want to go for a vote on this today?
Yeah, comment?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Oh, thank you, Mr. Manconi, for that. I think what you're saying is that we can work together on this, and that right now we're just at the tip of a change, and which is inevitable that we're going to have change, and that will affect ridership. There's no doubt about it. But I guess what we're looking at is next steps in terms of Still, we need to work on equity. We still need to work on, how this fits in as it's a business plan, like how we keep ridership up and how we see how it affects, it's affected by fares. And as has been stated earlier, that's not the only point. So I think we can agree that your point is that we can't do it immediately. I get that because we're about to do a big change. But I think we still have to work it in because the Transportation Master Plan is also coming up, and I think the whole point of this is to tie it in and to work together on this. So if you're saying that that's possible, then I think that's something that we can work on together.
Chair, if I can take some liberty, what I'm suggesting is, why don't we share with you what we have in this space, which is not just the studies we've done, but also the CUDA independent studies on what's driving ridership decline. There's great studies out of New York Cities and other things. And I manage I'm doing the Transportation Master Plan also. That's under my umbrella. If we show you what we have and you still want to go in this direction, you will have that opportunity during the Transportation Master Plan to do something in regard. Somebody said you control fares. Actually, you control it all. You control the whole destiny of what's going to drive ridership. Reliability, quality, safety, fares, punctuality, transfers, vehicles, all those things. So, but yes, my advice to you is let us bring you what we've got, and let us come to you with the Transportation Master Plan review process. And then at that point, if you want to add more to that, you can certainly do that.
I'd still like to go forward with the motion, if that's okay. Thank you.
Councillor Brockington.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to caution my colleague about the risk of this being defeated, because if it's defeated, it's game over. And my advice is that this be pulled today, and you have a very kind offer from our general manager to work with you to give you all the information you need, and to perhaps come back in 6 or 9 months once LRT is open. So to my colleague, please understand that if it's defeated, it's not coming back this term. Price is not the number one issue in my ward, and I said this at the budget hearings that we had. Price is important, and the concerns about a 2.5% increase every year concerns me very much, and I actually don't want that to happen, because I think we need to focus on new riders that can help offset the costs. The issues that drive my residents away from OC Transpo is not the cost of the ride. It's 3 things: reliability of the service, the capacity of the buses. People have the buses going by, but they're full in the morning, and coverage. That is parts of my ward that don't have OC Transpo service. We've had these conversations before. So price is important. It's part of the recipe, but in my opinion, in my ward, it's not the major factor. People want to be able to get on the bus when we say it's coming, and they want to be able to have a seat at least and not be on the bus like a sardine. And everyone has a different reservation price. Everyone has a different price that they're willing to pay to get on the bus. Some people are going to be willing to pay much more than $3.50 because they see the service. Maybe they're going further. For the people who are converting to Uber or Lyft, there is no Uber or Lyft ride that's less than $3.50. So obviously there are people who are willing to pay more than what they're paying now on the bus. So I want to reinforce again that price is important. There are legitimate concerns about ongoing price increases over many, many years, and I think we cannot ignore that. We, as a commission, need to look at how to tap into people who are using their car and who can convert to public transport. But in my ward in particular, there are some other key variables at play that is either keeping them away from transit or is making them have that serious conversation with their family members or spouse or themselves about, do I want to keep going when some of those major issues are addressed? I won't support this motion today. I think that the commission needs to listen to the direction from our senior staff here, including the general manager, and both get better informed about what a fair strategy is, what already exists, but also to let the dust settle once LRT opens. And I think that applies to some of the other motions that we have coming here today. So I just wanted to put those comments again on the floor and again encourage my colleague to consider deferring this until after LRT opens.
Thank you, Councillor Brockington. Any other questions for staff on this? Did you have questions of staff? Or?
I'm just going to say that I'd be willing to withdraw the motion, but I will be continuing to ask these questions. So at this point, so it's not going away, but I'll pull back on promises of the fact that we can deal with this as LRT rolls out.
Well, I think the commitment by the general manager was to circulate the information they already have, so your motion could be more informed as to where you want to go with that. Is that your understanding as well? So how about if you're willing to withdraw the motion, then we'll do that. And the general manager, if you could circulate that report to all commissioners so we all have a sense of what you do have on that topic.
Yes, it's multiple reports. We'll get you a package to everybody.
Okay. Great, thank you. So motion withdrawn. So now on to the next one is the Ottawa Seniors Transportation Committee proposal, Council of Aging, Pick Your Ride Free Day. Did you want that motion to stand or withdraw? Stand. Okay, we have delegations. Mr. Cullen?
Can I raise a point of order? We had this item, I believe, before us at our budget hearing a month ago. We had delegations already specifically on this item. Is it still in order to hear from this again?
Very good point, Councillor. We'll ask legal or the clerk's office, either one, whoever wants to weigh in on that.
Chair, yes, this motion is in order.
It is, so it's been ruled in order. One thing maybe, though, we could say before the delegations start is a question to the general manager on this. Is this something that we currently even have the systems capacity to do before we start discussing about when and if we want to do something like this?
Chair,
well, Mr. Cullen, I think if it's not even possible to do you still really want to do your presentation?
So, Mr. Chairman, we have a problem. Seniors have, so I'm Alex Cullen. On other things I do, I chair the Council on Aging's Ottawa Seniors Transportation Committee. I'm joined by Margaret Dunn and Asap Mita, there he is, who are members of our committee. Our committee has encountered a problem with the very successful program the city has, which is Seniors Ride Free Wednesdays. It's a very successful program to the point where seniors are encountering crowded buses, difficulties in making their appointments on that day because it is so successful.
Okay, so the question I'm asking you, Mr. Cullen, don't start into your presentation. The question is, do you still want to use your time here with the Commission to talk about this when you know that we cannot do what's being asked in this motion? We don't have the systems capability to do it.
Mr. Chairman, we would like, yes.
How about yes or no?
The answer is yes, Mr. Chairman, because
okay, thank you, Mr. Cullen. Thank you. So, Mr. Manconi, do we see that we have the ability coming up anytime soon? Or?
Mr. Chairman, can that...
Do you want me to rule you out of order and we'll just end your delegation?
We've got a delegation that's come out. With all due respect, yes, of course I would.
Okay, so if we can go ahead, even though we don't have the capability. Okay. All right, Mr. Manconi, we'll park your answer, and we'll do as the Commissioner asked. We'll go ahead with the presentation. I'll just remind the Commissioners around the table that we're going to come back to this, whether we have the ability or not. Mr. Cullen?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, we are not here looking for an immediate solution to a problem. We're here to present to the Commission that there is a problem and we're looking for a solution. We're asking you to ask your staff to examine the problem we're facing and see what they can come up with. It may be as simple as programming a card. It may be something else. We don't know. All we know, and this is why we're here, is that we have a genuine problem on Wednesdays. They are so popular on some routes, it's difficult for seniors to get a seat. It's difficult for seniors to make their appointments. And all we're asking, we don't know what capacity staff have, but we have worked well with staff in the past. They are a member of our committee. And all we're asking is staff, take a look at this, please, and see what can be done to deal with the issue. We are proposing that the day become flexible. Is there another solution? We welcome another solution. We're not asking for more money. We're not asking for more favors. All we're asking for is please recognize that there's a problem here. The seniors that are accessing that ride-free Wednesday are encountering problems because it's so successful. So just all we're asking is staff take a look at this, come back and tell you folks. And if they come back and say, we've done everything under the world and we can't come up with anything, well, okay, fine. But I believe there's more capacity and more empathy because staff have been very good to accommodating the seniors' concerns on the buses. There's a whole host of issues there. So please, can you take a look at this and come back?
Thank you, Mr. Cullen. Did anyone else from the delegation want to speak in your 5 minutes?
They're part of our team, Mr. Chairman.
So no questions. Okay. Any questions for the delegation? Mr. Olson?
Mr. Cullen, thank you for this. I just want to know if you know, or frankly, if OC Transport staff know, if again, alluding, I think, something to the chair said, do we have the capacity to monitor this?
Michael, it's questions of the delegation only.
The delegation, Mr. Cullen, do you know if the city has capacity to, in fact, monitor this, to implement this?
We're not transit experts. We think there are a number of different ways of handling this. One could be programming the Presto card. We don't know if that's within the reach of OC Transport staff or not. It may be that there is another means of dealing with this. So if we have the right answer, we come here with it. All we have is a problem that we're asking the people who are professional in the field to take a look at and report back to the Commission. And if there are costs associated with it, you folks will know and make a judgment. But all I can do, on behalf of our committee, we consulted with over 300 seniors groups and individuals in the city of Ottawa. Over 80% support our proposal that there should be some flexibility for that ride-free day during the week. So we know there's strong support from the senior serving agencies, from seniors organizations, because they acknowledge it's a real problem. So, all we can do is come here and ask for you folks to direct staff to take a look at it, see what can be done. I doubt very much that it can be resolved on the floor of the Commission today. We would like it to be taken seriously, if you will.
Thank you. Are you good? Okay. Commissioner, okay, just Sarah for now. Thanks.
The double last name can get really annoying, I know. Thank you, Mr. Cullen, for your presentation. I completely understand where your organization is coming from. However, during the budget presentations, I think it was Dr. Bozu, I think is her last name. One of the points that she made during her presentation was that just because you are a senior does not mean that you require a higher discount on a bus pass. Paraphrasing largely. So my question is that seniors are now being offered, as of July 1st, 2 ride-free days. And I understand that Sunday is not an optimal day for, say, medical appointments, though I can say from personal experience it's a pretty good day for grocery shopping. What I would ask is do you know, and you may not, and this is fine, how many seniors are actually accessing the ride-free day? You say that the buses are crowded and it's making it difficult to get to appointments, but do you have any data on how many seniors are accessing the ride-free day?
We don't. All it takes is on that Wednesday to go on the bus, show that you're a senior, and you're on the system. So we don't believe there's a means of recording that event. We do know that routes 11, 12, 14, and 85 in particular have been operating at full capacity, and it has been reported back to us. We've been working on this issue for a year. And so and you're quite correct, the Sunday service, which we did not ask for, didn't refuse, but we didn't ask for, doesn't help our people from using the bus to get to appointments that they need, whether it's physio, whether it's medical, whatever appointments they have. So we're back to square one, and we have a problem, and we just would like it to see how we can resolve this, because the whole point of the exercise was to enable seniors to be able to get out of their homes. It's better for them socially, it's better for them physically, to it reduces social isolation, it enables them to do things, and they choose that day because they can afford to take that day. It's free after all. So even with the seniors discount, some find it a difficulty to make ends meet. So they're accessing that day because it's free, and we have a problem. So we're not looking for anything more. If asked, I don't. If we could get that ride-free day, happy to give up Sunday for that, but that's not the issue.
So, with respect to my question regarding the data, your answer is that your data is based on anecdotal evidence, not on actual numbers.
We don't have access to those numbers, but we can tell you that the senior service organizations, such as Ottawa Senior Support, Good Companions, there's a coalition of senior support agencies that serve seniors. They strongly support our proposal because their clients are telling them it's a problem. It's not just us at the Council on Aging, but it's the senior service agencies that are saying, yes, there is a problem here that needs fixing.
Right, but you'll agree with me that it is subjective, anecdotal data and not hard data, is my point.
When the executive director of these senior service agencies tell us that their clients are saying it's a problem, I think it goes beyond simply subjective.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions for the delegation? Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Cullen. Thank you. Councillor Kavanagh, did you want to say anything and wrap up on that, or?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Basically, the points have been made that, that we're kind of, I don't want to say victim of our own success, but it's been very successful to have the Wednesday free ride. It is requiring Presto Pass, as has been pointed out. And it's asking to look at, an analysis and to report back to us about the possibility of making it flexible in terms of other days of the week for the reasons that have been pointed out. So this is to ask for analysis and to report back to us. And given the fact that we have a Presto Pass, there's a system in place that does, collect information. And we can, to see if we can possibly set it up so that there's some flexibility for seniors. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. Is there any questions of staff? No? You're good. Who? Did you want to ask a question of staff?
Yes.
Okay. Commissioner Olson.
Mr. Chair, thank you. Just wanted to know if there was the capability on the part of OC Transport to have seniors pick their own day.
So Mr. Chair, with respect to this motion, I can report today, and there's two parts. There's the motion, and then I'm going to, now that I've heard some details, I have a proposal that we could put forward if that works. We cannot program the system to do what is being asked, so I don't need time, I don't need resources. I'll just tell you that right now. We've already looked at it, and it's not restrictions with Metrolinx. We know how the system works. It's when our fare gates and so forth. So technically you can't do what's being asked, so I don't need to go away and do a study and report back. So there's part A of the answer. Part B is if you move the day to any other day, you've got a budget issue. You've got to go and find money and reopen up the fare table and find money in that regard. Now, hearing what I just heard, because I was asking my colleagues if you can't fix things you don't know, so why don't we, as a proposal, take away, I am happy to meet with the seniors groups and to hear, whether it's anecdotally or factual, about what are the routes where we're hearing about these issues, and we can, through the quarterly adjustments or route adjustments and the adjustments of the buses that you're investing in, we can see if we can address that. Because we do report on overloads and so forth, and so you can't fix what you don't know. If we have seniors that are struggling to get into buses, and I know many of them that use this service on that particular day, we'll look at that. We can do some visual observations out there and so forth. So I'm just offering that in the context of trying to provide some relief. But in terms of this motion, your answer or the report, I can give it to you right now. We can't do it technically, and you have a budget issues if you move from that day to any other day because it's more expensive to do it. So those are my comments in that regard.
Thank you, Mr. Manconi. So, Councillor Kavanagh, do you want to amend the motion to say that they report back as part of the next budget process? Because it's obviously a budget issue if there's a way to move it to another day. Or do you just want to let this vote with the understanding that you're asking for a vote on something we can't do?
So, Chair, can I just ask, I just want to get clarification. Is it actually a budget issue, or is it only a budget issue if you're switching from Sunday?
If you move from Sunday to any other day, you have a budget issue. It is more expensive on any other day.
So if it's any two, what you're saying, I just want to be perfectly clear. So if we make it any 2 days and more people use Friday than Sunday, that's a budget issue.
Again, I want to be clear too. So can you move it to a floater day? Technically, we cannot do that. So you can't even consider that. There's no technical feasibility to do that. And trust me, I pushed the team hard to look at whether or not that's feasible. So that's part A. If you say, let's reconsider this and let's move free Sundays to any other day, you have to reopen. I'm going to look to Clerk's Department. I think you're reopening up the budget, and you will have a budget pressure because any other day than Sunday is more expensive than what's in your current budget allocation.
So just before we go, I just want to make it clear that I would not support a budget pressure for an additional Seniors Day.
Okay, thank you. So can Councillor Kavanagh then answer what she wants to do with it? So how do you want to handle your motion now?
I think the question on this is about analysis and report back, and I appreciate Mr. Manconi giving us his comments now, but I still think that we need a report back to hear about all the different factors in this, because it's not straightforward. And I don't think the intention was to move it to another day. It was about making it, there was flexibility. I don't think it involves necessarily taking away the Sunday, for example.
Well, isn't flexibility using another day? So it is the same.
Making it so that they can pick the day they want. So if we could have it reported back, I would be satisfied with that.
Okay, so we'll call the vote. Okay. Do you want yeas and nays? Okay, yeas and nays, please.
Chair, I just have a question. Can this not just be like a submitted question that they return to us to the next meeting?
It was possible, Commissioner, and that's why I was asking the Councillor, but she wants to go ahead with the motion. So now we will vote on whether we even want staff to look at this and come back or not. And as Councillor McKenney pointed out, if it involves budget pressures, she, for one, wouldn't be supportive. I'm sure there's others around the table, such as myself, that are not interested in opening up the budget either. So yeas and nays have been called. Let's go for it.
Councillor Brockington? No. Commissioner Caracato?
No.
Commissioner Gala?
Yes.
Commissioner Kavanagh?
Yes.
Commissioner McKinney?
Yes.
Commissioner Olson?
No.
Commissioner Suds?
No.
Commissioner Tierney?
No.
Commissioner Williams?
No.
Commissioner Red Gilbert?
No.
Vice Chair Cloutier?
No.
Chair Hubley?
No.
Lost.
Sir, thank you. So, next one. And the final one. Number 5, service scheduling, regular provision of accountability performance reports to the Transit Commission. And the motion has 2 parts to it. Part 1, direct OC Transport to provide for the Transit Commission's consideration and approval for the fall transit service schedule, the winter transit service schedule, and the summer transit service schedule to be recommended by approval by City Council. On the first part, I'm going to go to the clerk's office first. I believe this motion will need 3/4 support before we can even entertain part 1. And yes, Councillor Brockman, you're right, this is Groundhog Day. We did deal with this. Correct? Is it, sorry, Caitlin, is it you or Taffy, Legal Services? It's
Chair, yes, this does have a situation attached to it because, as was mentioned at the last Transit Commission, this was part of revisiting authority that was granted to the General Manager, and as such, it will require 3 votes carried today, and will also require, if it does carry, a 3/4 vote at Council as well.
Okay, thank you. So let's do that vote first then to see if we're going to deal with part 1. Councillor Kavanagh, you want yeas and nays, or are you good with just show of hands? Well, no, we can't deal with it if until 3/4 of the commission agrees to deal with the motion.
Chair, for clarity, sorry. This is a unique situation coming out of the budget situation. So it's now on the agenda, and it can be dealt with today. It needs 3/4 to actually carry, though, to go to council.
3/4 to carry, not 3/4 to deal with. Okay. All right. Then we'll be able to do the delegations on that.
Mr. Chair, point of order. Just for my clarification, did City Council not already make a decision
in December? Yes.
And they voted against?
Yes. And
now the matter's coming back to the Transit Commission when City Council has already made a decision?
Yes, but according to Legal Services, that's okay.
I don't understand why it is permitted on the Council's agenda without having a 3/4 vote first, when Council has already made a decision.
Would Legal Service like to add to that?
Mr. Chair, and Taffy can, Mr. Nahas can elaborate as required. The reason why this matter would require a 3/4 threshold, not only here, but again, in order to be considered at council, is for the reason Councillor Brockington is stating, which is that during the current term, the matter of this delegated authority has been dealt with. And so this, as Mr. Nahas mentioned, is unique in that we don't have to waive the rules to get it on the agenda. It was done via the notice process. And so Legal Services advice is the simplest way would be for it to require the 3/4 threshold here and then again at council in order for this to proceed.
So deferring this from our budget deliberations to today is why it gets on the agenda, but after debate, when we have a vote, it requires a 3/4 to be successful. Okay.
That's correct, Councillor.
Thank you.
Is everybody good with that now? We're breaking new ground here. Okay, so part 2 was of the motion is to recommend that OC Transport provide a schedule of regular accountability performance reports, such as quarterly, to the Transit Commission on the operations of OC Transport and Paratransport. And on that one, Mr. Manconi, we talked about this at the last commission meeting, and I'd like you to reiterate for the benefit of the delegations, and we'll get into delegations next, but also again for those around the table. At the last meeting, you talked about the efforts that are underway to produce new reports more focused on what taxpayers and users want to know, and also to include LRT as a way that we're going to measure our performance going forward. Could you just talk about that, and then we'll get ready to go to delegations?
Yes, Mr. Chair. We will be doing what is being requested in rec number 2. You'll recall the elements of that is we're going to bring you a report post-LRT on what the scorecard will look like. We have joined those 2 expert world panels now. They've let us in because we're in the rail business. Those are independent. We are going to be recommending to you, and Chair, this was your idea, that a commission working group be established to help develop the performance metrics. It will be externally facing, externally reporting like other jurisdictions do. They will be meaningful and customer focused. And lastly, and I can't emphasize this enough, the previous scorecard, it got reported on a regular basis, and over the many years that it was in place, not one single decision was made by Commissioner or Council using that data. We want to bring you a scorecard that will drive decision making and touch on a lot of things that actually we've spoken about today. So it's on the work plan. So we're aligned on the second recommendation. It's coming. And it's going to be a report that will outline all that, the timelines and the framework and so forth, and we're going to look to a commission for a small working group. We might also want to do a customer focus group on it also.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Manconi. So let's go to delegations. Mr. Hasher.
Thank you, Chair, and members of the Transit Commission. I just wanted to speak in favor of the idea that we need to get back to regular reporting. OC Transpo is a massive part of the city's budget. Hundreds of millions of dollars are spent every single year on this service. Many transit riders, of which I am one, have found the reliability to be in tremendous need of improvement. And we know that it was a hard winter and that the LRT delays are impacting the reliability, but there are no doubt other things that could be improved in the transit system if we're to create a system that people want to ride on. And so I see no reason why we cannot have regular reporting. I see no reason why the city would not want to provide that information to decision makers here at council, but also to members of the public who are funding this system. So it's good to know that a report might be coming later this year once LRT launches. There's been a gap in the reporting over the last number of years because of the LRT construction, and transit riders have been going through a lot. And those councillors that sit around this table and others that participated in the Transit Week Challenge got to experience that, some of that firsthand. So I think that reporting is a normal part of people's work lives these days, and it helps ensure better outcomes. And so I think everyone would like to see better outcomes with the public transit system with regard to reliability and other concerns. And I think we need to get back to a situation where these reports are being shared with the public, which is funding the system. And then hopefully we can address the things that need to be addressed and the outcomes can be better. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Asher. Any questions for the delegation? We're good? Okay, thank you. Mr. Cullen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I'm here on behalf of the FCA, who had the opportunity to look at the council governance review when it was first released. And our members were concerned about accountability for a major part of the city budget, which is transit. Some $285 million is raised in taxes for transit, and our members want to make sure that our elected officials are being held accountable and in turn hold staff accountable to the goals and performances that council sets. I have a unique position in that from 2001 to 2010, I served on this council, and I can tell you that from 2001 to 2006, transit and transportation were the one single committee. As a matter of fact, that one single committee, Transit and Transportation, met 100 times between 2001 and 2006 and dealt with issues like TransPlan, which dealt with the schedule changes that staff would bring forward for committee and council approval. And that provided the opportunity for councillors and for the public to raise questions, concerns. Unlike the characterization that was presented to you last time, they did not take up an inordinate amount of time from 2001 to 2006. As a matter of fact, the largest in terms of delegations was 31 delegations dealt with the community bus pass. In 2006, the new council divided transit from Transportation Committee, and over those 4 years there were 48 meetings, and again it dealt with TransPlan as I outlined. And there were sessions where TransPlan appeared, there were no delegations. Sessions when TransPlan appeared, there were no amendments, no direction given to staff because of service concerns, because staff got it right. What we're asking here is, I'm pleased to hear that staff are going to be coming forward with metrics to show their accountability for the service they provide and for you to accept and give direction where needed. The issue is, though, that it's not just the responsibility of this commission to deal with these issues, but every councillor. Every councillor has been elected to pass judgment on the taxes, to pass judgment on the fares, which this commission does recommend to council, but there's also an expectation in terms of service. So how does the public ensure that there's accountability? By being able to come forward when there's a report and being able to say something. How is council, therefore, being held accountable? Well, there are 24 members of council, only 8 sit on this commission. So it's the FCA, it's not Alex Cullen, it's the FCA's position that such issues like this, council should be held accountable for, and so your consideration of these reports should rise to council as well, with your recommendation. It's been asserted that that means that there'll be individual councillors wishing to tinker with the system on the floor of council. My experience is, good luck with that. Didn't happen very much because it's pretty hard to make a compelling case for something going down this street as opposed to that street to engage the 24 members of council on. However, from the rare occasion where there is an issue, the public has a right to see this issue being dealt with and disposed of. So what we're suggesting...
1 minute left, Mr. Cohn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was about to conclude. On behalf of the FCA, we would like to see a better system of accountability, not only for this commission in terms of service issues relating to OC transfer operations, but that council also exert its responsibility as well. So that's why the FCA voted on this, and that's why I'm here presenting the FCA's position. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Cullen. Any questions for the delegation? None? Okay, thank you for the presentation. Thank you. And any questions to staff? No? We're good. You have a question? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. It's on the second recommendation, Mr. Manconi, if I can just ask you that OC Transport provide regular accountability and performance reports. Can you just explain to the Commission why that's not happening and how it could or why it should?
Certainly. We brought a report last term of the Council to the Transit Commission, and it was exactly what I've been saying. We are on massive detours, and all the performance metrics, the one that every reporter in town wrote about was, no matter how good the report was, we failed every time because it was 0 to 5%. 0 to 5 was the target for on-time performance. And when I took over OC Transfer, I said, well, who else measures it that way? And guess what? Nobody did. And did council decide that? And how was that formulated and so forth? So I can tell you, firsthand, if we start measuring 0 to 5 during all those detours, what that scorecard would look like. But We were on massive detour. The data was not being used. It was not driving decisions. It was not about accountability. It was just about bringing out metrics, lots of staff collecting data, bringing it to commission, few questions, and then it would just move forward. What we're trying to bring is the opposite of that. Meaningful data. I think we're very aligned to what the speaker was talking about. How do we shape decisions and policies and frameworks? And there's some people that have got it right out there, including the external public facing. Just go to TTC. You'll see, I think they have 12 metrics they report on. You can tell exactly where they are on performance and so forth. So it was documented to commission, and we basically outlined here's what we're doing and why we're turning it off and so forth.
So would it be fair to say then that once we have LRT up and running and the system back operating the way it should, that to look at a certain system of metrics that we could see as a council to understand how the different routes are working, what the performance measures are, and how we're measuring up to those would be fair?
Yes, and I will add more to that. I want to get your input into, we've talked about equity inclusion. We've talked about how do we compare with those two external agencies that I referenced. Those are international views in terms of that, benchmarking ourselves against that. So look inward, look outward, customer facing, and so forth. Remembering also we used to do an annual survey. We've stopped that annual survey. We hit about 79% satisfaction mark. And then we knew with LRT coming, why were we going to spend all that money on a phone survey of all things to just go out and get what you're hearing every single day? Again, I apologize for being candid, but I know what the answer is. We're struggling with service, and we need to launch the LRT.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to ask for the vote to be split on the first and second recommendation, but I wonder if the mover of the recommendation would be open to amending it to having that schedule of regular reports following the opening of Phase 1 of LRT.
I'm fine with that. I think that's almost inevitable.
Okay, thanks. So I'll make that friendly amendment then.
I'll say I don't think we need an amendment to that, Councillor McKinney, because we're already doing that, as Mr. Manconi referenced, and we talked a lot about it the last commission. We're already getting ready to produce a new report.
Yeah, but this will confirm. This will confirm. So if we could just, the friendly amendment is to recommendation number 2. I think we heard from Mr. Manconi that it would be fair to look at it after LRT is up and running. We'll hear back from him on what metrics. I mean, we're not spelling that out today, so we can hear back on what those metrics would be. But I think our customers will want to know how we are performing for para and for transit post LRT, and
that's what we're doing. We want to also put a working group together to help identify what those metrics will be.
Excellent. So then you'll support recommendation number 2 then, because.
Here you go. Councillor Brockington.
Just to pick up on that argument, though, Mr. Manconi, is there anything being asked in item 2 that you haven't already committed to doing to this commission?
No.
So why are we having this discussion? We have been told repeatedly that performance measurement was put on hold because the city's grid was upside down. And you aren't able to compare the apples of yesterday with the apples of today because it's 2 different comparable subjects. So we are aware of the challenges that are faced now, and you wouldn't be getting data that was much use other than we have some significant issues. So when you're going to do the measurement, you absolutely start after the LRT opens, maybe in the fall, once the dust settles. So I'm not sure why we're debating item 2 when we have a commitment that we're going to be done. You don't need a motion to do something that's already being done, or at least committed to doing. As far as item 1 goes, City Council has already made a decision on this point, and I'm going to respect that decision. I'm going to say that there are a number of things that are delegated to councillors to make decisions on. And I'll just give you a quick example. Noise bylaw exemptions. Riverward has a lot of festivals as well. When I have to make a decision on a noise bylaw exemption, whether it's for a construction project, a festival, a large event, I consult with my community. If it's going to be a long noise bylaw exemption, I say you can't do it late on Sunday nights. I want some relief. It's going to be for multiple weeks. Give me some days off to give my residents a break. Same thing with route changes. We as councillors get a lot of feedback and information. We synthesize, we compile that. We sit down with this team on a regular basis. And we give input to them, and they make their best changes to the system based on the resources available. The last thing I would want is to have a huge lineup of the public from one particular neighborhood, and we get swayed to put more resources in a neighborhood when other neighborhoods who may not be perhaps as organized or are not as confident coming out to speak, and we decide to shift resources. We delegate that to our staff on everything. Infrastructure projects, bus routes. We say, all right, you're aware of the priorities, you have the resources, take politics out of it and give us your best recommendations to try and fit the needs in the system, and that's what we have now. So elected members to council can sit down with staff and deal with these issues, and if there are neighborhood-specific issues, the local councillor can sit down with all the different stakeholders in the group, iron out what those issues are, and again, bring those to OC Transpo staff's attention. So while there may be some merits to having council officially approve those seasonal route schedule changes, I think it works well now. And so given that council's already made a decision on this within the last couple months, I will not support item 1. And I don't want to vote against number 2, but I'm questioning why it's in order to approve that when we're already doing it. So I'm not going to vote against it, but we're already going to do it. So I just want to point that out. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Gower.
Very similar thoughts to Commissioner Brockington. I almost raised a point of order because I think we have already approved the spirit of number 2 in our terms of reference. This is from the terms of reference number 7. Part of our role is to review and approve all changes to transit network policy and performance standards related to operations. And number 13 is to receive operational performance reporting related to the transit system. So it is certainly in our mandate, and as we've heard from staff, we will be receiving this kind of reporting as we go through. I definitely support we need to receive performance reports, but as the motion stands, I won't be supporting this particular motion.
Council, would you like a ruling from staff on that? Because both of you and I would tend to agree with you, and I think some others may as well. We're already doing number 2, so I'm kind of wondering, are we, okay, let me put the question to staff then. If we vote to approve this item 2, are we handcuffing the efforts that are already underway, as Councillor Gower mentioned and Councillor Brockington and Mr. Manconi? Are we handcuffing that?
Mr. Chair, if the question is, and maybe I'm not understanding it correctly, is if you as chair are in the opinion that what is being proposed in recommendation 2 is, I struggle with the words to describe it, but approving something that has already been approved, then it would be within your right to rule on that.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Okay, is there any other questions? Sure.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. It's not a question. I just wanted to raise that this late last night, all of the citizen commissioners received an email from a citizen of, they didn't say which ward they were in, I apologize, on the specific matter of the routes being the summer schedule, fall schedule, and winter schedule. And I just wanted to raise that it's my opinion that when someone takes the time to write a very lengthy email, they feel strongly about it. It's not a tweet, it's not a Facebook post, it's a lengthy email to 4 citizen commissioners. And so I'm not going to read it out, it's quite lengthy, but I do just want to point out that this citizen feels, and I agree with the citizen, that it's not appropriate for this commission and city councillors to be approving what are largely operational matters that have been delegated to Mr. Manconi and his staff. And I just wanted to raise that because I feel that when someone writes in and takes the time, that perspective should be shared.
Thank you. Okay, is there any other questions to staff? Okay, so on the motion, on item number 1, before we consider this matter, and we've already received our delegations, everything, we've been informed by legal services that they are the opinion with respect to the first recommendation concerning the transit schedule. Council approved the delegation of authority bylaw, which was 2018-397, on December 12, 2018. Schedule G, Section 11, delegates the authority to make revisions to the bus and train schedules to the General Manager of Transportation Services Department. As such, the adoption of the first recommendation would constitute a revisiting of that authority renewed by the delegation of authority bylaw at the beginning of the term of Council. Such a recommendation will be in the opinion of legal staff, therefore require a suspension of the rules, which means a 3/4 vote of the members present and voting would be required to approve. The weighted vote for recommendation 1 would apply both at the Transit Commission and at Council. And recommendation 2, based on the advice from Council or from the Clerk's office, I'm going to rule it out of order because I see we're already doing those reports. I will work. Mr. Manconi will ask you to work with Councillor Kavanagh to see if there's anything else in the reporting that she wants to add into that, but I think it's better we keep that away from a motion so that we have the flexibility to do what we want to do with that. So my ruling is that that one's out of order. Can we go to the 3/4 vote on...
Chair, could I just ask a quick question then? If you're going to rule number 2 out of order, can we just find out from staff a date when we can expect to start receiving the accountability and performance reports?
Fair enough, yeah.
Mr. Chair, I'm glad you raised that question because Councillor Brockton was asking. The first thing you're going to get is a report saying here's what we're thinking about doing, and that's when we're going to talk about striking that working group, the timelines, the best practice review. So we'll bring that to Commission because I cannot give you a date when we're going to turn the data on because we haven't. I'm not showing up with here's the metrics because that's counter to what I just outlined. I'm bringing you a plan. We strike the working group. We shape the metrics. Then we come back with a rollout plan to Transit Commission.
That's good for you? Okay, so are we okay then? We're going with the vote on recommendation 1. So we'll need yeas and nays because 3/4 needed.
Councillor Brockington?
No.
Commissioner Caracato?
No.
Commissioner Gower?
No.
Commissioner Kavanagh?
Yes.
Commissioner McKenney?
No.
Commissioner Olson?
No.
Commissioner Suds?
No.
Commissioner Tierney?
No.
Commissioner Williams? No. Commissioner Red Gilbert?
No.
Vice Chair Cloutier?
No.
Chair Hubley?
No.
Lost 11-1.
So that recommendation 1 lost, therefore it won't rise to Council. And 2 is out, so now we're going to move on to in-camera items. Is no in-camera. So notices of motion. Are there any notices of motion for subsequent meetings? No. Are there any inquiries? Yes. You have an inquiry, Councillor Tierney?
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, I brought this up with our GM, and you'll take time to review this. At a recent, and I'll say TTC, being referenced to the Toronto Transit Commission, the TTC transfer policy change permits for the Presto cards carrying riders for 2-hour transfers, resulting in increased ridership and additional costs on trips. And in the November TTC report, they also indicated the introduction of the 2-hour transfers will result in an additional 5 million customer trips per year. How would a policy change affect OC Transpo customers for costs and ridership if we implemented something like this in Ottawa?
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you, Councillor Tierney. Any other inquiries? No? Okay, any other business? Seeing none. Motion to adjourn. Thank you, and amen.